Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Metropolitan Board of Zoning Appeals is now in session for its regularly scheduled meeting on March 20th, 2014. I'm Joey Hargis, and I'll be presenting the cases for review in today's public hearing. I would ask this time if everyone would either put their cell phones on silent or vibrate so as not to disturb today's meeting. Quite truthfully, you probably don't have any cell coverage in this room anyway, so you're just killing your battery. The procedure will be to introduce the case record as the Codes Department has it. We'll do that on the wall here by means of a PowerPoint presentation. We'll present any maps, photographs, plans submitted for today's cases, along with any letters in support or opposition to a case. We'll also present to the board any correspondence we've received from other metro agencies. At the conclusion of my case record, the applicant will come first to the table along with any persons in support of their case. If there's opposition to a case, the board will hear from those parties opposed after the applicant goes first. The board, in their rules, provide that cases without opposition, applicants have 10 minutes to present their case to the board. To the right of where you'll be sitting, right beside the very nice court reporter there, is a clock that will have your time on it. The clock will run for your testimony. It will stop for any questions the board has of you or answers to those questions. But once you start back into testimony, we will restart that clock from counting down. In a case with opposition, both sides of a case, both the applicant and the opposition, have 15 minutes in total to present their case to the board. And that 15 minutes, as I said, is an aggregate. It's not per speaker. It's for everyone. So if there are multiple people that wish to address this board, please divide your time accordingly before you come up. The applicant is permitted a period for rebuttal, but applicants, your rebuttal period is part of the 15 minutes that you're allotted, so please divide your time accordingly. All section numbers I refer to today come directly from the Metro Code of Law. Title 17 was adopted by the Metro Council and became effective on January 1st, 1998, and applies to the entire jurisdiction of Metro government. I'll make a part of the record now the entire zoning code, a copy of which is at my table behind me, and I'll dispense from reading individual sections unless the applicant or opposition requests that I read those sections. The zoning code requires that these proceedings be taped. Therefore, it's imperative anyone wishing to address this board, please come forward, come to the table here, speak into the microphone and identify yourself and make your presentation. Should be noted that it's found if you've presented false or misleading testimony to this board that may have affected this board's decision, any approval may be revoked at a later date by means of a show cause hearing. The board will go through all cases set for public hearing today, and after each case, the board will then vote and discuss and vote on the cases here before you. The board is vested with the power to act and outlined in Section 1740-180 under the Metro Code. The code requires that 4 members of the 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. I currently have 4 members present. I am expecting a 5th. I do have 2 members absent today. The code requires that, as I said, 4 members of this board be present to constitute a quorum. The code also requires that you have 4 affirmative votes to grant your application. So as it sits now, you need all 4 votes before you, if those members hear your case, to approve your case. If you do not get 4 votes, your case will be re-advertised and reset for the next available public hearing. And unfortunately, we're looking at June 5th currently scheduled for the BZA before you can come back on a rehearing, on a tied vote request. In the event my 5th member shows up, and I suspect he will, and he participates in the case, and you fail to get 4 votes, your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days. In the next 30 days, I have but 1 meeting, and that will be April 3rd. If at the April 3rd meeting, none of the 5 who participated changed their vote, and neither of the 2 that were not present become eligible by watching our hearings on the YouTube channel and reviewing the case record. So if they don't participate and these members don't change their vote, your case is deemed denied by operation of law. Any applicant or aggrieved property owner may request a rehearing within 60 days of today's public hearing. Further, any applicant or aggrieved property owner may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court within 60 days. After that time, the board's decision is final and no further action may be taken. If you're an applicant and your case is granted today, it is necessary for you to come and pick up the permit for which you've applied. Should be noted, you have 2 years from today's date to pick up your permit. for this board to approval to remain valid. If you fail to pick up your permit within 2 years, your approval today is null and void, and you will have to come back and seek reapproval at a later date. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. The appellants were notified as certified mail as required by the zoning code. All affected property owners were notified within 300 feet by first-class mail, and a legal ad was published in the Tennessean as required by the code. Before we begin, the board does allow elected officials to address this board prior to today's meeting. And so I'll call now any elected officials present. I see Councilman Glover, you're here. Are there any other elected officials present? Councilman Todd, good to see you as well. Guys, any other elected officials present? Okay, seeing none. Gentlemen, if you'd like to address the board now or before, you're welcome to both come on up if you'd like to. And I'll turn it over to you all for comment.
Thank you. I want to come before you to talk today on case 2014-023, Tulip Reserve. I have worked with all of the involved parties on this, and I think we've reached an agreement to grant a variance today. And so I come to you today to ask that you do support granting the variance for the applicant. The two primary affected individuals on this is obviously the homeowner in the current lot 7. That is, their home is actually part of it is in lot 8, and I've spoken with them. I've spoken with the builder. I've spoken with several people in the neighborhood, and everybody has, as I've said, we've reached consensus on this, and so I just stand in support of offering the variance to them today, if that be your wishes.
When you say variance, that they had proposed, I think, 2 options. One was option 1 that had a smaller, I think, 6,600 square foot lot, and the other one was option 2 was 7,000. So is the compromise option 2?
The compromise is option 2.
Okay.
And the one thing I'm going to ask is, if I understand the process, is that if you do grant the variance, then we have to go to planning, and they'll replot the lot. I'm going to ask that planning can, if we can bring that square footage up any at all, we will. But if we can't, then option 2 is the agreement that we've all reached, and okay. Not the first one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Glover.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Carter Todd. I'm the council person for the Green Hills area of Nashville, the City of Oak Hill, City of Forest Hills, and I'm here today to speak on case 2014-024, which is a request to build a kennel there on the little sliver of land between Franklin Road and I-65. And actually, this is a perfect place to do this, because when you have a kennel with barking dogs, you don't want to bother neighbors. And this little sliver of land is tucked in there in a perfect place. The only affected neighbor would be maybe the Hampton Inn, and their attorney is here today. You'll hear from him. They're in favor of this. The Hampton Inn doesn't accept pets, and this would be a perfect thing for if you're traveling and you want to stay at the Hampton Inn, you put the dog next door and you stay at the Hampton Inn. So I think this is a win-win for everybody in Nashville. My district doesn't have any kennels. We would love to have a kennel. I think they now call them pet resorts or whatever, but this would be a great thing, and my people are enthusiastically in favor of it. Thank you.
Members, as Councilman Todd reflected, we have received correspondence from the adjoining landowner in support for that as well. With that, no other elected officials present. We'll go through the consent agenda. The board has a consent agenda, and prior to today's hearing, a member of the board reviews the record in each case, and if they feel the case meets the criteria for the application that's been requested, and they feel that testimony would not alter the material facts, they recommend the cases to the remainder of the board for approval. Take a moment that Ms. Mercedes Jones reviewed the consent agenda for us today, and Ms. Jones makes the following cases up for consent agenda. If you're here on any of the case numbers that I call today and you're in opposition or have questions or concerns, please raise your hand and we'll hear its case in the regular order. The first case recommended for the consent agenda is on page 1, case 2014-22, Josh and Jenny Farrow at 9184 Hester Beasley Road, requesting a variance in the side setback. You're the applicant. Are there any parties in Opposition to case 22 on Hester Beasley. Case 22 on Hester Beasley. Seeing none. This is a variance in side setback in the AR2A Agricultural District's request to reduce the side yard. The exceptional topography on the case and the irregular shape of the lot are the hardships in that case. So Ms. Jones recommends that case to the board for approval and consent. The next case recommended for the consent agenda is on page 2, the middle of the page, case 2014-24, Terry Lewis Stevens, the appellant, Taringa Group LLC, owner of the property at 5614 Franklin Pike Circle, requesting a special exception in CS to renovate the building and use it as a kennel to construct additions thereto that you see listed. Is there any parties here present in opposition to case 24 on Franklin Pike Circle, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, seeing none, those are the two cases Ms. Jones recommends for consent. In that case.
Okay, we have a motion for two cases to be approved on consent. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of case 2014-022 and number 2014-024 approved, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
If you're here for cases 22 and 24, your cases have been approved. You are free to go. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if you'll give me just a moment, let me set up the presentation. We'll begin with our first case, case 2014-23, over on Jennifer Court. If the applicants will come forward at this time. Give me just a moment. We'll cue everything up. Be right back. I say I have something to show you. I promise I do. We'll see if we can get this to. Okay, members, seems to be working now. I'm running, just for full disclosure, I'm running off a different video cable than I normally do. But so if the images may be slightly distorted, please forgive me. The subject property you see located here in red on the aerial photograph is listed on our records as 2208 Jennifer Court. They're requesting a variance in the lot area in RS15. This is a cluster lot development, meaning the minimum lot area required is 8,000 square feet for this lot. I will not bore you with the cluster lot details, but however, this district does let them reduce the lot sizes in neighborhoods. The request, as noted by the I believe Mr. Taylor, is option 2 the councilman spoke about. This is the plan shown for that. The request is to allow the applicant to re-subdivide the property line, moving it from the platted line, which you see is intersecting with the existing home, to the dotted line, which would be here. By doing so, they would not create a setback variance need on the existing structure. It would reduce the lot down to 7,048 square feet, so necessitating a variance of 452 square feet.
You just said 8, what's the difference between, you said 7,500?
7,500 is the minimum lot size required, yes, sir. Yeah, I said 8, it's actually 7,500. The cluster lot development lets you drop 2 base zones in RS down to 7.5. This is the subject lot, the new lot, which you see is lot 8 on the drawing. This would be that home site, homes to either side. This home in the bottom right-hand photograph is the home that's been constructed over the current property line. And again, as the drawing shows, it would be essentially the back corner of this home, portions of the sidewall there. These are other lots in the adjoining immediate vicinity, just upper left photograph, a lot that you all, I think, denied a variance on that lot, and the applicant brought in a plan that complied on that portion. But I'll leave the proposed subdivision plat up on the screen. That's probably the most germane to this discussion. With that, sir, you'll have 10 minutes. Let me check before I say that. Is there any opposition present or parties who'd wish to address the board? Any concern? Okay. Okay. Mr. Zan, I'll put you in the opposition category just for timekeeping purposes.
I'll change it when I get up.
There you go, sir. And with that, sir, I'll turn it over to you.
You can see there were 3 markers on the back of that lot, and when it was laid out, for some reason, they pulled from the offset marker instead of the rear property marker, which had put that house over on the other property about 5 foot. Did not find it for about a year and a half till I went and got a permit for lot 8. Went to trying to put a house, it wouldn't fit. That's when I would come back and talk to Joey and requested a variance, see if I could get a variance for 2 reasons. So I could still build here and to clear it up for them where they don't have any trouble if they go to sell in the future. Just trying to get that taken care of now. And we did have another submittal, but Mr. Glover spoke to the homeowners and stuff, and they were all right to go along with this one now. They were saying that they thought that was their yard the whole time. So, but he got that cleared up with the homeowners in lot 7. And I do have signed petitions from everyone else in the subdivision except for 3 people. 1 stayed neutral, 1 was out of town on business, and Mr. Zantz is the other one that will speak also.
Is that something you've turned down already?
And that's all I have to say.
Anything further to add?
I don't think so, sir.
Any questions before we bring opposition up? Okay, you will have 13 minutes and 14 seconds time left on rebuttal after the opposition comes up, so thank you.
Understand?
Okay, go ahead.
Ready?
If you will,
Okay.
state your name.
Thank you. My name is James Zant, 2113 Gina Lane, Lot 17, as you have it on some materials that you've been given, and we're in Hermitage, Tennessee, 37076. Okay. Originally, when We received a copy of the original submittal back on or about, I think it was about the 14th of February for this variance request. The original submittal was for 824 square feet with the proposed lot line redrawn actually right into that bend in the neighbor's fence at the top of the plan here. And I think you'll recall I was here in October, and I'm not the neighborhood policeman. I really wish I didn't feel compelled to be here, but with 20 years experience in land use decisions in 3 different communities in 3 different states, some of this stuff sticks with you. And all I really care to see happening is that the right thing, under this circumstance, it's either grant a variance or call mega movers, and we're not going to call mega movers because that's insane, obviously. We just want to see a variance granted along the lines exactly as you have in the proposal option 2, which is a smaller variance that places the lot line approximately 5 feet off the corners of the building and the structure already built on Lot 7, which instead of 824 square feet, the builder has this now down to, I believe, 452 square feet. We're happy with that, okay? And we're good with that. In my training, it was kind of beat into us. You don't grant variances in this kind of a circumstance for more area than necessary to legally correct the problem. And that's where I'm coming from on this. And actually, God bless her, my wife found this before I did. So she's an engineer's daughter, and she spotted it almost immediately. We do have, however, one unresolved concern, and it's of a technical issue, and I'm not going to get all hung up on it, but my materials as submitted to you in our letters, and bear in mind, I didn't get this drawing until Tuesday. I received an email from the builder, a nice letter that I got at 5:30 this morning with this drawing also, so I haven't had a lot of time to research all the numbers, but we're showing, we have on our submittals to you in a letter that I dropped off Friday afternoon to Mr. Hargis's office. Our original lot area plan for Lot 8 shows that lot at 7,668 square feet. That's referenced in the materials that I've submitted to you on our, let's see, what did I call that one? That was exhibit, was that 1B? No, that was 2, Exhibit 2 in the submittal that I gave you that shows, if you look at Lot 8, it shows it on that page, it's 7,668 square feet. We are, and I'm a little confused because I always measured a variance size of the size of the variance subtracted from the lot area map. The actual lot area measurement, not the minimum lot size allowed. Now, this is something for this board and for the Planning Commission and the staff to, because I guess the planning staff is going to go on out and ascertain measurements anyway. I only want the right thing to happen. We're talking legalities here. We're talking accurate measurements for title companies, for taxation purposes, for the whole 9 yards, and they have to be accurate. There's maybe something I'm not understanding, but in the jurisdictions I've worked in before, the variance size was subtracted, the 452 in this case, from the total area lot size of 7668, not the minimum lot size. So we have missing in action here 168 square feet, and I have a concern about it, but I'm not all hung up on it. I'm going to put this in your capable hands to solve. And I'm sure you will, and your legal staff will help you. We just want this replatted accurately and legally correctly, and everybody will be happy. And I wanted to certainly commend you and thank you for your time, and commend Councilman Glover for all the wonderful work that he did with the builder, with the injured parties here, and communicating with us to achieve what we all believe to be a rational solution to the problem. So thank you so much. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, I'm going to retreat happily.
I just want to know that you have been heard, and we do appreciate that you're holding everybody accountable for this neighborhood. I know you all have a lot going on over there, and we want you all to have the best possible solution when this gets built and everybody's happy. So we thank you for bringing things to attention. As far as what comes out of what the variance is requested for, we're going to rely upon our staff to make sure that those square footages are properly platted, because it's their expertise to do that. But we do want you to know that we hear you, and we thank you for being here as a part of the discussion.
Well, God bless you. Thank you. We used to rely on staff as well. I am not an engineer. As I told Mr. Taylor before, my trigonometry is well beyond me now, and I leave that to the pros to do. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Okay, if the appellant will come back, you have 13 minutes, 14 seconds.
The only thing I have to say is we just, Womble and Associates drew it up from the minimum and just, told us Womble and Associates did the drawing, the plat. And I guess when he does the final plat, it'll be more accurate and exact to the, the exact thing. We just knew, and I gave a letter to the homeowners, which just said the minimum square footage was 7,500. Wasn't trying to lose 160 something feet. Just knew that was the minimum, and that's what we had to have to work with. That's all.
Okay, any questions? Anything further to add?
There's another set of homeowners here if you'd like to hear from them. I mean, I don't.
No, they didn't speak
Yeah, they can't.
first time, so they can't speak now, so. All right. Anything further to add there? With that, well, close the public hearing. Joey?
So close the public hearing on case 23.
All right, discussion time.
It seems like a good solution to grant the variance for 452 feet, which is the minimum necessary to fix the problem. I'm not sure exactly how we grant the variance if it isn't a hardship. I guess the hardship is the mistake. Maybe that's but it seems like a fair solution. The neighbors are supportive of the solution. Their council person is supportive of the solution. It seems like the thing to do. So, I don't, to me, if everybody involved is in agreement, then I think that it's.
So are you saying option 2 is what you're?
Yeah, that's what the council person has said, that option 2 is the one that everybody agreed to, and then that's what I think we had heard. In terms of the minimum necessary to fix the problem, then that's the option, and that would be a variance of 452 feet.
I agree. Mr. Chairman, before y'all start into a motion, I think the other thing, just adding for your discussion or digestion when you do come up with a motion, that if you're comfortable with the plan as submitted, that you condition it to the 7,048 square feet. And as the councilman talked about, if they end up making the lot larger, great. We certainly not want to grant it any less than that square footage, which would reflect what's shown on Plan 2 or Plan B of your.
Yeah, I'm confused on the language you say. I mean, if you.
Meaning you guys would be, rather than saying we adopt a variance of 452, as Mr. Zant said, if the square footage I've got listed there is 7,500, that would cover the math involved, that you're adopting that plan right there. And
So you're saying that we would cover a variance that would require at least 7,048 square feet on the lot?
yes, and no less than that. That way, it'll help in the transmittal
this
to the
drawing.
planning. Yeah,
Yes.
that'll help in the submittal from our office to the planning department for their plat purposes, that we don't get to the platting stage and they show the planning commission a plat less than 7,048 square feet.
Unfortunately, this drawing doesn't have platted dimensions on it. It's showing dimensions relative to a structure that's already been erroneously built or erroneously laid out. So,
But you're looking for maximum square footage.
Yes, yes.
but
He's looking for maximum.
but we're also saying it's per this drawing, and this drawing doesn't have dimensions on it.
Why do we have to say for the drawing? Let's just say maximum square footage is 7,048 feet, and then if they come out, I mean, that's minimum square footage, I mean,
Yes.
right? And so anything that's over that is beneficial.
Sure, great.
Doesn't hurt the other homeowners. It's
Yep.
actually helpful to them.
We do.
Yeah, I mean, we're saying as shown in option 2, but we're requiring it, I mean, since they don't have the dimensions and we can't, it's.
You don't have to refer to
Boy,
this
you
drawing.
got a couple of angles and a curve in there. I don't know that I can do that on the fly. I don't know if I could do it if it were a square, but.
We're in essence,
But I'm just saying, but the point is that if we do it, as Joey said, and limit it to specify the 7,048 square feet, then they can do the math and say it has to be at
Right.
least 7,048 square feet. However they get there, if they.
right.
I think this is more of a legal question, Tom, but it seems to me that when we typically grant a variance, it's based on a property scenario and not based on a legal situation. So how do we make this fit within the variance requirements of the motion?
It certainly sounded to me, Ms. Jones, like Mr. Taylor's comments pointed to what the code refers to as an exceptional condition of such property, which would result in the peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties as a proper basis under Section A, physical characteristics of the property. I know this board typically considers physical characteristics an extreme slope, an open body of water that runs right through the middle of a parcel. But from what Mr. Taylor described, it seems to fit right within that language, and certainly that's what I understood him to mean based upon his comments.
Well played.
The fact that half of a house is sitting there is an extreme condition.
So it's not proper for Mr. Taylor to say, I ditto that, and
Yeah, exactly.
accordingly.
Well, it sounded a lot better when you said it than when I thought I said it, but.
Are you going to make the motion? Here's your variance.
All right, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll move that the board approve the variance because all the requirements of MCL 17.40.370 have been met. The board finds that the unique characteristics of the property are
Extreme?
are extreme. And the precise nature of the hardship is that there is a home sitting on part of that property line that requires that the plot next door be adjusted. I would move that the variance require at least 7,048 square feet on the property in question, and that would result in an approximate 452 square foot variance according to the plan that they propose labeled option 2.
I'll second.
Well said. Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It so passes.
Okay. Case 23 is approved on a vote of 5-0 with the conditions as stated. Mr. Chairman, our next case, I'll call the applicants in case 2014-25 to the table. If the appellants for Green Hills Court LLC would come forward along with any persons in support of their case. And gentlemen, before you guys begin, let me kind of walk through the process for the members of how you're here and why you're here.
Okay, floor is yours.
The subject property you see located here at 1926 Warfield Drive, actually, requesting an item D. This is a change to a nonconforming use. This property is a nonconforming use in that the Board of Zoning Appeals in 1975 granted what our lawyer would cringe is called as a use variance. You have no such authority any longer. Back in 75, It's debatable whether they had authority, but they did grant use variances at that time. And this would be one such case that you guys probably will not see again. First time I've seen one in 20 years. So, but essentially the board allowed this parcel to be used as a parking lot and issued a permit as such to construct the parking lot and build it and allow it to exist as you see here. They did place one condition upon it that's pertinent today. They placed some other conditions, but the one that's before you today is the removal of the condition that allows them to have a driveway on Warfield Drive. The board at that time said no access to Warfield and required them to put up some sort of barrier, in which you'll see in the photographs they put up a guardrail. Now, granted, it may not be the same guardrail from 1975, but they restricted access to Warfield Drive. I was approached in my office, not by the applicant, but I think a representative of the applicant came to see me about, we'd like to find out obtaining a permit to get a driveway out here. I searched through our records and discovered this appeal case and the conditions there too, and I've listed the conditions essentially that are on there that I could read from the handwriting on the permit. So it's my best translation of what they stated. But this is the subject property looking into the site from Warfield. I'm actually standing on the shoulder of Warfield facing north into the parking lot. And then a view along Warfield Drive, both toward the west. This road curves around, as you see in the aerial photograph. My photograph, it curves and links up with Hillsborough Road. And then back to the right down Warfield. And then another view of the subject property. So that is the case record as we have it. Again, they're asking for the removal of the condition for allowing a ramp cut. And since the Board of Zoning Appeals granted, as I said, Mr. Michael, you aren't here, a use variance in 1975, which they can't do now. This remains in this board's court because it is now a legally non-conforming use. So it's back before you to have that condition removed. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all.
Joey, before we start the public hearing, I just felt I needed to disclose that the appellant is a lifelong family friend, and I do not feel that will have any reflection or bearing upon my decision-making, but I just wanted to make it public knowledge. If anybody has an issue with that or objection, I'll certainly step away, but I don't feel like that'll have any risk to the case. Okay?
Are there any parties present opposed to case 25 here? Okay. Seeing none, gentlemen, you'll have 10 minutes to present your testimony to the board.
Okay, now the ball's in your court.
All right, thank you. My name is Leroy Norton.
Excuse me, could you?
Sorry, thank you.
Granberry Jackson, who's one of the owners of the shopping center, and Harlan Whitley, who's one of the tenants, in case you all have questions in that regard. I've been a developer in Nashville for some 30-odd years in Nashville and surrounding areas. Specifically, I've developed 4 properties in the Hillsborough Road corridor, all of the retail type properties. And in fact, my office has been in one of them for 25 years. I've grown up in the Green Hills area, so I'm extremely familiar with the development issues in this area just because of all the activity that we've had in that area. Granberry, as owner of Green Hills Court, used to be the Bavarian Village for those of you that have been here a long time, came to me and was asking me to evaluate some of the issues regarding his development in 2 or 3 different areas, one of which was the traffic flow. If in the ingress egress or their entrance currently is just into and out of Hillsborough Road at the front, and they're in mid-block. And as you know, Green Hills or Hillsborough Road is sometimes referred to as a parking lot. So it has become a serious problem, and part of the issues is not only everybody that's there, but we've got the Green Hills Mall is getting ready to build a new Dillard's and then put additional retail space where the old Dillard's was. You've got the 2 new hotels that are proposed. Then Southern Land is doing their development there at Richard Jones and Hillsborough Road, which is adjacent to this property. And so in addition to what's already there, then Southern Land is proposing to put a turning lane in front of this property, as well as an entrance right adjacent to it. So again, with the huge amount of congestion of traffic already, we're going to have the increased situation. So needless to say, a lot of this additional traffic isn't already there, but it certainly brings, I guess, concerns and difficulties not only to the owners, but to the tenants and customers as well, as far as going in and out of the property, because it just has the current entrance just on Hillsborough Road, or onto Hillsborough Road. In fact, currently, if during the business hours of any day, the light right at Richards Jones backs up the traffic, because this property is only about 150 feet from the traffic light. So every time the traffic light changes, that it becomes just a parking lot of cars. By the time the light changes, then the light at Warfield has let that traffic go, so it fills the void. So it's a very constant problem of a car trying to exit, especially if they're going south and going across 3 or 4 lanes of traffic, trying to fight in between the cars that are there, the congestion that's there, and then being able to merge going towards town sometimes becomes a little bit of a task also. So and if you haven't been there during the busy traffic hours, you've missed something. But the difficulty that we find is that it's just almost a log jam. So when the turning lane comes, Sutherland puts the turning lane in and puts that entrance in, it's just going to add more complications to the issue, and it's become a very significant traffic, difficult movement of traffic, etc. Harlan could address, he sees it every day because he's a tenant there, and getting his customers in and out, they're always complaining about that amount of traffic. So we started doing some evaluation, and interestingly, we found, as Joy said, we found the letter in 1975, that's 40 years ago, where that they allowed the then current owners to use that as a parking lot, as you see. And it had 3 conditions. The one being that there shall be no access to the subject property from Warfield Drive. The other 2 are fine. The only request we're making today is that to be changed is that to eliminate item number 1, which is the no access to Warfield. And the reason this is beneficial is that the traffic going onto Warfield immediately then can go to Hillsborough Road, and has a traffic light. That's the new traffic light that there at the Hill Center that's been installed. So immediately they can go, rather than trying to weave in amongst the traffic, they can go to on Hillsborough Road out in front of the center. They can get onto Warfield and immediately go to the traffic light, and then go left or right as the case may be. So obviously we believe this would significantly alleviate traffic tie-ups at the Hillsborough Road entrance, and use a new traffic light for the benefit of what it's supposed to be. Now this, if we have an access, call it a driveway access or curb cut, but a driveway access, it's certainly not going to be a shortcut anywhere, because it only accesses the property itself. So our request today is just to modify the appeals that was approved back 40 years ago. We have some other people that are here in support, and interestingly enough, I think we had 3 letters in file in support, and then the Terrells were in opposition to it. I would tell you that there were 3 letters, but the approximately 40 homeowners in and around Warfield Drive, I think the Terrells represent 4 lots. The related parties related to one of these letters actually has ownership in about 30 of these properties, along with a couple other people that were in support. So of the approximately 40 lots, about 30 of them even acknowledged that they had no problem with it. So in that regard, we're hopeful that you can understand the concern and would like to eliminate it. The Terrells acknowledge that we have an access to an alley. There is an old alley that has ruts and potholes. It's 1 lane. It's almost impassable using it, especially if there's another car there coming the other direction. You have to pull off, et cetera. So that solution, using that old alley that's not maintained, et cetera, doesn't appear to be any benefit at all because nobody maintains it. So our request today is that we be allowed to have a driveway access onto Warfield so we could get to the traffic light. So that's in essence it. If you have any questions, I've got 2 gentlemen here that can.
Yeah. The only thing I saw on the plan that kind of the sketch that you all proposed was a 24-foot opening to Warfield. Can you tell me what other improvements you're planning for that parking lot?
Well, one thing, I know that the Terrells are on the east side, the 4 lots right just to the east, and we'd shown it kind of in the center. If we need to move it, at least stay 30 feet off of their property to protect their property, we'd be glad to start to the access at that point. But it becomes a paved drive, just like you'd have at a house or a shopping center, because the parking lot's already paved and it's curbed. We're going to repave and recurb and restripe that whole parking lot, and to make it just a nice entrance.
So would that be considered, I guess, so it would be a secondary main entrance to the...
That's correct, and we would go to traffic and parking and get the approval as necessary, whatever the case might be.
And then Joey, I don't know if this is a question for you, or are there landscape buffer requirements?
There would not be any required unless you were to place them upon them.
And then if we were to place requirements, what?
Well, Dave, excuse me, but it currently says, item number 2, the lot shall be paved and screened with 6-foot evergreen shrubs on 3 sides and permanently maintained. That's in the old agreement, so we're not asking to change that.
You're not going to, but you can't do it on 3 sides because one of those sides is going away.
Well,
so yeah, I mean, one of the sides, but yeah, and I'm just concerned about the 2 sides.
Right.
But so that's there.
Is that correct? I mean, you have it currently landscaped along Warfield right now.
Well, it's just trees.
So you're going to make it something.
40 years ago, they might have planted something, but everything's pretty tall right now. I think we would certainly trim it up, make it becomes more appeasing or appealing, as the case may be.
Thank
you. Let me ask you a question. So that parking lot now is a overflow parking from that strip center right there?
Well, it's not overflow. It's just it's used every day, just like the rest of the parking lot is.
I guess my question would be, if that's opened up to Warfield, does that then create an avenue for the people that are parking at that center now to start using that instead of exiting on the Hillsborough Road? Will that create an alternate route for the cars that are now parking at the building to come through that? Is that going to increase the traffic on Warfield?
I wouldn't think so, because it's certainly a lot easier just to turn right off of Hillsborough Road and come in. It's more just to evacuate the traffic that's there, if in fact they can't get out on Hillsborough Road, because it's all the way to the back of the property. So if you're in the front 2/3 of the property, you're going to try and get out on Hillsborough Road only if in fact it's very difficult when the times when the traffic's so backed up you can't get out, that you might come to the back of the property and evacuate that way.
Okay.
Joey, I don't remember seeing anything in our packet from like the Planning Commission or Traffic Enforcement. They wouldn't do anything on this. I guess my concern on the traffic piece is what's the impact on Green Hills traffic, which
Well, it's going to be the same because they're just coming to the traffic light rather than trying to get in through 4 lanes of traffic. I mean, you got the same,
Yeah, I
you
think
got the same number of cars.
Public Works would be involved on the permit side for the ramp cut on Warfield as far as designing it properly. That would be their involvement in this process.
Having spent a number of years growing up in Green Hills, that is probably one of the most difficult shopping centers to come out of. There's no question about it.
But Harlan can testify to his customers complain all the time.
Well, sure, it is dangerous, especially if you have to take a left-hand turn
Yeah.
and to get into traffic, but also because of the congestion on Hillsborough Road, which is only increasing daily, they're looking for some kind of relief valve anyway. I mean, I think
That's right.
everybody's focused on that from a transportation side of things. So I think there's a real case to be made for some relief in that, especially in that area.
And we'll certainly keep it off at least 30 feet off of the Terrell's property so that we wouldn't interfere with anything that they had going there.
Are you okay with that being a part of the agreement that you keep that?
Sure.
Okay. Just to see if we can give them some support as well. Okay.
Any other questions?
So if it's only meant to be used for egress, would you be amenable to having a single-lane traffic exit only? Because it seems like if you use it for ingress, also you're going to be introducing a lot of traffic on. Was that Warfield?
Warfield,
And-
if you've traveled Warfield, it is very circuitous to get on Warfield from Lone Oak. Lone Oak is the only, and Lone Oak, actually Castleman, Overhill, and Richard Jones are your main thoroughfares. Lone Oak is a street that goes to Richard Jones and to Overhill. And if you go on Warfield, you have to make 3 or 4. It is just not convenient to go that way.
You have to really know where you're headed to go
Yeah.
down that street anyway.
So is that a no?
We would prefer it not, yes.
So do you have any idea what? I'm assuming you didn't do a traffic study for Warfield for any of this.
We don't have a traffic study.
I guess my issue with that, just that question is that they currently have the egress coming off of the alley, which is not creating any stress there. And knowing that they're already currently working on some egress issues from Green Hills, being able to keep
But they
that
said they
road
weren't
open
using the alley.
for- I'm
Well,
sorry.
They said the alley was unusable.
People-
I can promise you people use it.
They use it.
Bump through the potholes, et cetera.
Yeah.
But we can't, there's nobody that will maintain the alley. The city doesn't, and nobody else can touch it, I don't think, because it's a city.
So it is a city alley.
Yeah, and so they still come out on Warfield that way. So what we're trying to do is make it just a more convenient and more easily obtainable to the traffic light.
It's actually less dangerous, to be honest with you. If you use that alleyway, you can get stuck going both
Yeah.
directions. So it does create some relief, I think.
So is your question essentially, should it be exit only and not?
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. And then is the parking code required for the other property? Is it a part of your code required parking?
I'm not sure. I don't understand the
The
question.
property that the appeal for on Warfield do those parking counts apply to the other property, the strip center?
Parking restrictions on other lots on?
No, I'm saying is the
Do you
park,
mean-
the space that your appeal is for, those parking spaces, are those required by code for the adjoining business that you say these people are
Do you know,
parking at?
do you need those to meet?
We'd have to ask that 40 years ago. I don't know what, because the codes 40 years ago just required 3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. Now you've got 4 or 5 parking spaces, but you needed more than that. We've got a lot of examples in Green Hills where it's only 3 per 1,000, and which was the code then. And so as they have observed, they bought it after the lot was already there. But 3 per 1,000 is not enough, and that's why the code was changed to 4 or 5 per 1,000 parking, and that provides that additional parking, which it's a perfect example of not having enough parking in the old zoning codes.
So I guess, is your question, Does this decrease any parking?
I thought it was a pretty simple question.
Yeah.
I'm simply asking, are the spaces that are in use now and the ones that are delineated required parking or not?
David, I can probably answer that better than the applicant. I would say under today's code, yes. At the time in 75 when this was built, the applicant's right, it was a 1 per 350 square feet. It's now 1 per 200 under the code. So at the time that board granted the variance to allow this to exist, they probably didn't need it. But under today's code, I'm saying that sitting here not knowing every tenant in this building, but
Sure.
In theory, yes, these would now be required to comply with this parking requirement.
And so it's kind of hard to tell from the aerial, but is it just the double-loaded parking that's in the center of the lot, or
No, it's
It's double loaded and then on each side.
Yeah, it runs.
Because it's about 150 feet across at the back and about 100 feet at the front. So it's double loaded in the middle, and then about half of the each side is got additional, as you can see there.
And we don't know how many parking spaces are there?
Probably 50.
50 is a good rough number.
50?
50 is a good rough
50.
number. I'm Granbury Jackson, a part owner. I'll add that if this center was built today, we wouldn't have enough parking spaces. Just like there's a dearth of restaurants in Green Hills, and one reason is no one can meet the parking requirements for a restaurant given the requirements. And most of them are grandfathered under the old regulations.
And it is striped. It's paved and striped. So in counting, there's somewhere around 50 parking spaces.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? If I may, one of the questions, and staff was just conferring on this, and I think it's appropriate to throw it out just for the board's information. If the request or the appeal is approved for this modification under item D, Public Works will be tracked on this as it continues through the system, because obviously they'll be involved in the whole curb cut process. But once tracked, if Public Works deems it appropriate for this to be, for example, an exit only or a two-way use of that entrance at Warfield, they will have the opportunity to give that input at that time, route it through Traffic and Parking Commission if need be, which works in conjunction with Public Works. So all relevant ideas and questions, but the people who do that are going to have a bite at that apple. So I just wanted you to have that info as you deliberate on this matter.
Which brings on a question for me. If we approve that now, does that override any decisions that Traffic and Parking may have based on that, or would our?
No, it does not. Because Public Works will be tracked and incorporated into the discussion upon approval, they're going to have a look not only at the curb cut that would eventually have to come in on Warfield, but could then take a look at anything else. And if Traffic and Parking Commission needed to be engaged at that point, Public Works would have the opportunity to do so.
That's really a great point, John Michael, because I think right now everybody is interested in what's going on in Green Hills, and anything that's reviewed is going to be handled with the utmost care.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything further to add?
Not at this time, thank you.
Close the public hearing, Joy.
That'll close public hearing on case 25.
Opposition here. There is a letter.
Yeah, there's a letter.
Is there any opposition present?
That's why they only got 10 minutes.
I'm Jim Carroll. Granbury said that.
What? Are you in opposition? Are you in opposition?
I've turned in opposition. I need to get it in the packet. But my one thing that came.
Well, hang on a second. Hang on a second. Yeah, if you come up.
We only gave you 10 minutes.
In that case, then we need to change the time and add 5 minutes to your time to have rebuttal for this right here, so.
Mr. Chairman.
I thought he said it was not opposition.
Good, sir. Come on in.
But let's be clear here, this is now opposition time coming here, total of the time, rather than, we're not time or two, we've gotten where we've had
And then how far off the cypress?
opposition come set with the,
It's about 100
right, so let's, now we're clearly on opposition time.
Good. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
30 feet.
Yeah, let's, hey, for purposes of record, gentlemen at the table, if y'all have questions between yourselves, let's just take a brief recess, let you guys talk, and if the board wants to bring you back up, we will.
Okay, so you're talking about splitting the difference?
Sure.
You want to?
No, if you want us to, we'll at least stay 30 feet to give you
It's up to y'all.
All right, so what, are we recessing for 5 minutes or something?
Your call.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The board stand on recess. Thank you.
All right,
That's
thank you.
100 feet across there.
this is, I know this is to scale, 150.
Greenberg said it was 100, yeah.
Yeah, so it's right at 100 feet, yes. So if we came 30.
When we last left everyone, there was some discussion occurring at table, so I turn it back over to you whether those parties have.
Okay, you're still on the floor.
Thank you, sir. We reached an agreement with the adjoining property owner. We'll keep it 35 feet rather than 35 feet off of his property line, which is, he's on the east. We'll be 35 feet off.
Before you go into that, you are,
Leroy Norton.
right, but you're still on
The appellant.
the appellant, and there is no opposition, so I guess that is our question. So this,
That's correct. There is, right.
now you can continue with your
I'm
presentation.
sorry. So, but we will keep the driveway access 35 feet off of the easterly, the adjacent easterly property line, and we will abide by all the new public works and traffic and parking regulations that would be related to a driveway access, curb cut, as the case may be.
Okay, before we close the public hearing, it's still open. Any questions?
Close public hearing on
Case
No,
25. sir.
Before you do, I'm asking, do we have any other questions for?
My apologies.
Well, I'll ask this. Have you discussed with staff any code implications? Per the old order, you're only asking us to remove one condition, which leaves two other conditions that may or may not come into conflict with current code. And I'm curious if you've looked down that rabbit hole yet.
We haven't, but we obviously, the landscaping, there is no land, it's just trees and overgrown, and we're going to trim it all back. And I mean, it's inherent in us to make it
Sure.
More attractive. So
I'm not saying you won't do anything appropriately. I'm just curious, and this is also, I guess, for Joe, if there's any other code, if this will trigger any code issues that will be in conflict with the two remaining conditions.
It will not. Those two conditions remain still in full force and effect, and I can't reach from this code and put new things upon them.
Okay, so down the line, no one's going to say, oh, and by the way, you need to light this?
No, sir. Yeah.
Okay, that was the gist of my question. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Anything further to add?
that's it. Thank you, sir.
Joe, now you can close the public hearing.
We'll close public hearing on case 25.
Discussion time.
I actually think this is a positive thing for the Green Hills area and for that shopping center in particular, especially since there are several locations there that have consistent neighborhood participants. There's curves and some other things there that I think would be beneficial for this opportunity. And I think everything else that we've raised really belongs in somebody else's purview. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't see that there's an issue here, especially if they've reached an agreement with the next door neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is traffic and parking, and it sounds like that there's an avenue for that. And I do travel down Moorfield quite a bit to get to Hillsborough Road and the Health Center and other businesses in the area. It is a predominantly residential street that seems like it's in transition in terms of traffic flow and other developments that are going on. I think it's a really good solution for this business, but I'm a little bit concerned that, y'all have heard me say before, if I don't know what you're doing, it causes me concern, and there's not a plan. There's an idea, but not a plan. And I would like to see a plan to give me greater comfort, but I think that since traffic and parking, we'll have to see the plan and approve the plan. I think in concept it's a pretty good idea. But I am concerned about not having specific details of, what it's going to look like, how is it going to work, and that type of thing. I think it's a better solution than the alley, but let's make no mistake, it will be a main entrance to that shopping center, and I think it will cause a lot more traffic on Moorfield.
Well, to that point, I know that other agencies will look at this, but we're at the moment the only ones charged with looking at the appropriateness of the idea. So it's sort of the last bite at that apple, I think. I think that once that the other guys look at it, they're going to be looking at more of the technical side. What's the radius of the curb cut? Is it a ramp? Is it not a ramp? Whatever. And I think in that it's a item D appeal that we are charged with, looking at the appropriateness of the issue. So that's and I agree with the not exactly knowing what it's going to be in the end is always troubling for me.
Well, I assume, and I'll ask our attorney, that we have the right to put specific conditions like that on there, like this has to be compliant with?
Yes, in short, the board can condition its approval of certain things, even under item D. I believe that's correct. And of course, Mr. Harper's comments are right on the point, because that language out of the Metro Code for changes to non-conforming uses talks about board determining the appropriateness of proposed changes, non-conforming uses and structures. And that's it. So to the extent the question is just simply, can you add conditions? Yeah.
And they're not asking for a change in non-conforming use, they're just asking you to modify the existing non-conforming
Modify the
use.
existing permission.
So we don't have to put the test on it, whether it's more or less non-conforming. This is just a change in the current.
The comment from the discussion was they agreed with the potential appellant amendment to move to locate it a certain way. There is no record of that here. That needs to be put in as a part of the condition. I'm thinking if we agree to.
It's appropriate to add that.
Right, okay.
Any other conditions on your mind?
Just wanted to be sure that we're not creating a traffic hazard there, and and if that's under somebody else's purview, I'm just saying that we're not sanctioning or overriding.
So in Public Works will determine whether or not it goes to traffic and parking, is that?
Whether it goes to the commission itself, and typically that's part of what they review. Joey may be able to speak to it more eloquently than I, given his more day-to-day interaction, but that's always been my understanding for these items.
This is
Their staff, I think there's 4 folks over there that review ramp and curb issues. They'll review it, and, should it comply with their regulations, they'll obviously sign off on the permit to allow us to issue the permit. They have a similar, it's very similar, honestly. Let's say they didn't meet some parking or traffic regulation of how that ramp is or such. They can go before their commission and seek a variance from their own regs on the design aspects of it. But whether they can have a ramp or not is your call. And that's sort of what's before you today is can they have a ramp, yes or no? And if so, But I'd be a little mindful of delving too far into Public Works' arena, I guess, of design.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to design a ramp, but what I would like is for someone with more expertise in, traffic flow and that type of thing to say, yeah, this isn't a bad idea. I think from a customer, it makes sense of the business, from someone who actually is using the space. But I guess that's just the mystery to me is, well, are we going to cause more problems by and not have the proper brakes in the system down the road if it does cause a problem? I guess that's kind of what David was saying too, is that if this is the last hurdle, maybe it's not the total last hurdle, but if we say yes, does that give everybody else an incentive to say, well, yeah, let's just go without putting in that thing? And I just don't know enough of the flow, so I don't want to beat the horse to death, but I do want to make sure that it does get that extra level of thought and care that I don't think we have I don't have the expertise to do today.
with all due respect, these folks have to go through a design and review in order to meet these conditions. And so what we're doing is giving them the permission to go forward. And until they get that, there's no reason for them to design and get the conditions met. I have a lot more faith in our staff in each of these departments than I do in our expertise necessarily on every condition that comes before us. So I don't necessarily feel like that is a challenge to this situation. But before any of these things can come up before the rest of these agencies that need to review, this needs to be decided. So if what you know is, can they go out of this piece of property or not, and leave the rest of the design issues and the regulations to those who it lies in their court?
Yeah, I mean, and I understand that and respect it, but I mean, I guess what I'm, you've got a very large shopping center in the most expensive rent district in town, and all I'm asking for is a plan for a parking lot, not the building design or anything else. So I mean, I don't think it's. I get what you're saying, and it's a little cart and horse and that type of thing. But that's my only reservation. And again, in principle, do I think it's a good idea? yes, I don't have any negative feelings that, no, this is a real bad mistake, but I do have that reservation that I typically get when I don't feel like I have a full set of information or full set of plans, or the information from other agencies that alleviate the concern I have. So that's just it. That's all. So it's.
I think the fact that it's an existing parking lot and that all we're granting is whether or not they can egress from that parking lot that's already existing puts the design and the traffic and parking studies and all those things in the certain agencies. I guess all we're doing is granting a non-conforming condition being released, right?
Well, implicitly, we're giving increased traffic, permission for increased traffic on Warfield, but we haven't seen a traffic study to say whether or not that's an issue. And that's what allowing the curb cut does. And it was 40 years ago and things were different, and traffic's bad now. I wonder what the commissioners were thinking when they said, yeah, but you can't let those people go through Warfield because it's a residential area.
Respectfully to my colleagues, my thought is I would have been more comfortable if the applicant was willing to say we're good with just one-way egress from the property. But we don't have anybody in opposition here. I mean, all of these landowners are here in support. So somebody else can decide whether or not what is going to be increased traffic, I agree with you, and people are going to use that as an entrance once they know about it. But I think somebody else has to decide what the proper manner in which that traffic flow will go is, and it's not us. And I think all they're here to do is ask for the access, and there's no opposition. So that's my position.
I'm with what you say. I just want to be sure that it doesn't come back later on and it be said that the BZA said we could do this, and that circumvents or shuts down traffic and parking or anybody else that's.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct in your concern, or I should say it another way, to answer your implied question, no. Public Works nor Traffic and Parking Commission are prevented from reviewing this, considering this, or even putting the kibosh on this, even if the Board of Zoning Appeals approves this under the appropriateness standard today.
Perfect.
The whole thing could still get run off in the ditch, both metaphorically and perhaps literally.
Perfect answer. Entertain a motion.
All right, I'm going to move that the board approve the proposed changes to the non-conforming condition by removal under condition number 1 from the April 16th, 1975, what do we call that, Joey? Order. Thank you. Okay.
And you've got to include the 35.
And we want to make the condition that this will be 35 feet minimum away from the Terrell property, and it will run with the property.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
And a second. Any other discussion?
I'll say that I would be much more in favor of the motion if there was at minimum a traffic study required. But I will find it hard to approve it without it.
But say that you're what?
I would be more likely to vote in favor of this having seen a traffic study.
Okay.
But I'm reluctant to vote in favor of it without a traffic study, or at least a parking plan.
I guess you're entitled to put that restriction on the motion to approve if you want to, and then the one that made the motion.
I'd just like to understand to what end a parking study after the motion's been approved or a traffic study means. I mean, what does that do to change the condition?
I don't think it would do any good if we approved it now. I mean, that's why I would want to see the traffic study.
So what you're saying is they need to go, what you're saying is you would like for them to go back and do a traffic study and come back to us?
That to get a affirmative vote for me, that's what I would require, yes.
Okay.
And assuming the traffic study were favorable to doing what they want, not just getting a traffic study.
So what are you saying with regard to the motion that's on the table? Are we changing the motion?
I am not offering an amendment. I'm saying I'm not going to be able to vote in favor of it for that reason.
I thought he was looking for another condition.
We have a motion and a second. Call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
It passes 4-1.
Case approved on vote of 4-1, condition ramp to be 35 feet from the eastern property line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, before we begin our final case, if the applicant, let me catch up with the applicant real quick, just for Linda. Okay, our last case today, case 2014-001, Mr. Richard DeMontgomery, the appellant and owner of the property located at 746 Benton Avenue, requesting a special exception in R6 to continue using the existing residence for historic home events, previously approved under conditions of appeal case 2010-77, referred to the board under section 1716-160. The applicant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180 items. Okay, Mr. Chairman, the subject property you see located here in red at 746 Benton Avenue. It is in the R6 district. This request comes before you, filed by the appellant off of appeal case 2010-77. This is the aerial photograph of the subject property. Members of the board, I'm pleased to report that we now have more updated aerial photographs. They're only a year old now instead of 4 years old. So, yay for us. These are the conditions as stated on the order for 2010-77. I've typed them verbatim from the order. Let me modify that, not verbatim. I did correct some grammatical errors that I put on the order in 2010. But so hopefully my English teacher will forgive me. The two areas that you see listed in red are conditions 1 and 2. The appellant has approached you all to renew his permit. He is specifically asking for those two conditions to be removed from his case, as well as the third condition. I'll let Mr. DeMontgomery cover that during his testimony. Go through some photographs I've shot of subject property upon my visit out to the site. Okay. The appellant is here at the table. Before he begins, are there any parties present in support of the application here before you? Okay. Folks that are in support, Mr. Murray, remember they need to speak during your time up on this front end. So I'll let you call them whenever you're ready to come forward. Mr. Murray has asked, there's a video clip I'm going to show for you all via our YouTube channel here at the moment he cues me up. Are there parties opposed to the case present? Wish to speak? Okay, we do have those. Each half of this case, both the applicant and opposition have 15 minutes to present their cases. Mr. DeMontgomery, you will have a period for rebuttal, but only of the time that you save of that 15. So I'll let you be the keeper of your time, how much you'd like to respond. Just let Ms. Huey or myself know, I'd like to save the balance or however much time you'd like to save. With that, I will turn it over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Richard DeMontgomery, the owner and applicant here for this permit. I would like to reserve 8 minutes of rebuttal time, Mr. Hargis.
Okay.
I have 3 neighbors who have taken time to come down today to speak in favor of my application, and I've asked them to please limit their comments to 2 minutes. Mr. Hargis, I don't want to interrupt them, but if you could please help me keep them on schedule so that I can stay on schedule to have a rebuttal period. I want to thank you all for reviewing my collective exhibit. This case has been ongoing for 14 years. I would doubt that there has been another case before you that's been much longer than this. It has been personal and extremely demanding and draining situation. My wife is a Metro school teacher and could not be here today. She certainly wishes for this to end. The repetition that this is required 2 years ago, Mr. King, you will recall, Ms. Jones, I believe you were here as well. We are now less than a year to when this current permit expires, and yet we're facing yet another renewal period affecting business, bookings, uncertainty. So today I'm asking for the board to renew this permit without a time limitation as an enforcement mechanism. I'm also asking the board to end the applicant-only limitation because it makes no sense that the next person who may own the home when I pass away or if I'm unable to continue operating the business due to health concerns has to go through this process again. I'm also thinking of the neighbors. The neighbors are absolutely exhausted having been put through this process again and again and again, and I think you'll hear them speak to that. So thank you for keeping the time, Mr. Hargis, and saving my rebuttal.
Parties, I've got 3 additional seats. Thank you if you'll come forward.
I'm Betty Horton, 726 Benton Avenue, 3 houses east of the DeMumbrian house. Our son lives next door with his wife and our 3 grandchildren. If it wasn't wonderful, I wouldn't want it to exist. We knew the venue would be open for business when we moved there in 1998. So did everyone else who moved there since 1999, including all of Mr. DeMumbrian's personal critics. I've helped collect petitions from 110 neighbors out of 160 homes, affirming they don't object to the events at the DeMumbrian house. By contrast, a handful of opponents continue to fabricate and exaggerate reports of violations. Valet parking is provided as needed. There's no real traffic or parking problem whatsoever. This board will determine which side best represents the neighborhood. We suggest good neighbors are those, including Mr. DeMumbrian, who has twice been elected secretary unanimously, and others who participate in neighborhood meetings, Crime Watch, and contribute to fundraising events to improve the neighborhood. By contrast, are Mr. DeMumbrian's small group of enemies who don't participate in neighborly affairs. Instead, they secretly circulate emails urging others to boycott all...
Excuse me, ma'am, this won't be taking off your time. I'd like to keep the personal comments to a minimum if at all possible, and if there's evidence that you'd like to offer, that's fine, but let's not make this personal, please.
No bride will book a wedding if there's an uncertainty about the venue's future. No prospective new owner wants to invent in a zoning by personality process. The council wisely provided for historic home events as a way to save and maintain some of those big old homes. We hope the board will act on real evidence without a hint of prejudice or favoritism. Thank you.
My name is Jeannie Rowe. And I live on the street directly behind the DeMumbrian house, Roycroft. I'm here to make it clear that I believe this venue is a tremendous benefit to the neighborhood, and I have never seen or heard any disturbance whatsoever coming from an event there. It appears that a few neighbors do not approve of the Metro Council's decision to allow for events to take place in large historic homes, which encourages investment and rehabilitation of these very expensive properties. They are few. They do not speak for the vast majority of the homeowners who understand the purpose of making limited commercial use of these historic homes. I ask the board to issue a new permit to Mr. Demonbreun, and most importantly, not to require him or any other owner of the property to have to repeat this process, so that we may ensure that the property be properly maintained so that it may be enjoyed by all. The limitations now in place have been reviewed for over a decade and effectively balance use with neighborhood impact. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pete Horton, 726 Benton, 3 doors east of the Demonbreun House. Past president of the Neighborhood Association, still on the board, publisher of the email news group that notifies neighbors of special events, and everyone invites neighbors to notify Mr. Demonbreun if they have any complaints. For the overall good of the historic residential neighborhood, please renew his home events permit so formal weddings can be scheduled at least 2 years in advance, and spare the neighborhood the agony and disruption of reigniting this feud every 2 or 3 years. Whatever annoyances some may find at the venue can be dealt with relatively quickly at a BZA show cause hearing, just like other businesses. The well-publicized concept of keeping him on a short leash for 15 years gets to be insulting, threatening, and I'm not surprised it would lead to some serious name-calling over that period of time. I hope we can think of a more civil way to negotiate annoyances than to threaten bankruptcy. Our neighborhood is 160 homes small, and the Demonbreun House is at the highest point and near the main entryway into the neighborhood. 30 years ago, the Neighborhood Association voted that saving that landmark home, then an indoor roost for pigeons, was a top neighborhood priority. Repairing and renovating the property nearly bankrupted Mr. Demonbreun, but he made Benton Avenue attractive for others to move in and improve the big older properties. 15 years ago, the neighborhood voted unanimously to endorse special events at that venue, along with a number of those provisions. Not one single neighborhood meeting has been called or addressed in the last dozen years any issues at that venue. Back in 1999, at a hearing before this body, Attorney Clay Petrie was your chairman. He said our neighborhood association meeting should discuss the special events at least quarterly and try to solve some of the issues in our neighborhood instead of a few personalities coming downtown by stealth to air out their laundry.
Mr. Horton, just in deference to Mr. Demonbreun's time, he wished to save 8 minutes. You've got about 10 seconds left.
Okay. We hope this can come out of here today without being an appealable issue, and I promise we'll take the issue to the neighborhood. We'll try to get all of his critics involved again, and we hope that you'll focus on the property issues and give us any advice you might have so that we can spare you further time down here on these kinds of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Thank you so much, Pete, Betty, and Jeannie. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask Mr. Hargis to queue up a brief excerpt from the last Metro Council hearing. Mr. Walker is...
I'm Henry Walker, 744 Benton Avenue, and my friend Jerry forgot to say one thing. May I take 15 seconds?
No, sir.
Well, here's why it's important. I was opposed to this until Jerry and Autumn said we have no intention of turning this into an historic event location. All we want is a bed and breakfast. We've had enough problems in our neighborhood with a historic event location. I'm next door to the Demonbreun house. Jerry's house is on the other side. So Jerry said that as he said to the Planning Commission, and as he said in our neighborhood meeting, they have no intention of turning this into an historic event location. And he meant to say that tonight, but he forgot.
Well, thank you for saying it.
Okay. Based on that, I have...
Mr. Hargis. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to show you that because the problem with these people in opposition is the concept of events. And it doesn't matter what I do, how small they are, they don't want events to happen in this neighborhood. And they have done everything from run lawnmowers in the middle of weddings in May of '05. They have climbed my fences and taken flash pictures during wedding receptions. This last weekend, if you look in my collective exhibit, the front of my house was egged. 2 nights in a row, I called Metro Police. You can see the pictures and the sign in my front yard because these people will not allow me to operate. I have done nothing but try to improve the neighborhood. We used to do weddings for 150 people, and we had a hearing several years ago, and in an effort to compromise, I voluntarily agreed to cut my events in half to 75, plus the people in the bed and breakfast, up to about 85 people, which has worked incredibly well. These people will still not accept those reductions. They come here today telling you, asking you to cut my events further without any concern of whether I can financially make this venue profitable enough to keep the doors open. There are 2 small events and 2 larger events allowed right now, and they work very well. But today they're coming forward to say, cut the events further. There's no material evidence they have today to present to this board that would support that proposition. So I'm asking you today to look over these limitations, which I have included as a front page to my collective exhibit, and make the changes to discontinue this renewal process. I beg you to do that because it is literally killing me. The stress this is causing, the loss of business it is creating, the insecurity it is creating is unnecessary. After more than a decade of review, I believe the limitations work. Finally, limitation 11 I have suggested. If there's any allegation that I have not complied with the limitation, I'm asking that any member of the community, neighborhood, be required to report it to codes timely, not show up 2 or 3 years later and allege that I have violated a limitation. This is what happened years ago when I didn't know to save time for rebuttal and I wasn't able to come back and respond to those. So I'd like to reserve the last 4.5 minutes of my time to respond to what will be coming. Mind you, Mr. Cochran, in his actions, required me to file an injunctive order to stop him from disrupting weddings with his lawnmower. I also had to call the police when Ms. Schaffner climbed my fence in the back alley and was taking flash pictures during a nighttime wedding reception. These people don't like me because I stood up for my rights and tried to protect my business. That is why they're here today. Thank you.
Okay, you'll have 3 minutes and 55 seconds rebuttal time left.
Okay. Board now hear from those parties opposed to the request. If you'll come forward, please. You'll have 3 seats. Any other parties wish to address the board? Okay. I still want to see them. Gentlemen and lady, you have 15 minutes amongst yourselves. Feel free to divide your time accordingly. You, as opposition, do not have a rebuttal, so this is your time, and feel free to use it as you wish. And with that, I'll turn it over to you 3.
Okay. My name is William Cochran. I live at 751 Benton Avenue, and I want to make it clear to you that I am not here as an enemy. I am not here as a critic. I am not here as an opponent. I'm actually not here to express opposition for or support for this permit. I am simply here as someone who is actually impacted by these events. I live immediately across the street from the home in question. I am here as someone who wants, as a result, to suggest some conditions that would be on this permit, should you issue one, that would render the resulting use consistent with the residential zoning of our neighborhood and would protect the quality of life of my family. That is why I'm here, and the only reason I'm here. Speaking of conditions, I'm going to let Mr. Walker address a couple, but I do want to mention that this idea of making this a permanent fixture to the home or to without a term, I think really needs to be rejected outright. And I make that suggestion or that comment because this BZA hearing, we don't enjoy coming down here any more than you enjoy seeing us. But it is one of the only mechanisms that we have as neighbors to hold the applicant accountable for his management of this commercial enterprise that affects our lives.
So have you filed complaints of
in the past?
Years ago.
Violations?
I think the last time I did that was back in 2006 or 2005.
But what happens is they get appealed, and then there are no conditions.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm sorry. I'm Maria Schaffner. I live at 2002 Ridley Boulevard, which is across one house, Mr. Walker's house, across the street. and the alleyway dumps the music onto my house. But we have in the past, and what has happened.
Excuse me, but he has the floor. Do you want to continue? or you
Well,
want to
I did ask a question.
He asked a question,
he asked a
and
question.
so I was responding to the BZA's question.
You want me to go?
Okay, so, I mean, have you ever filed a complaint of a violation?
Oh, I'm sure that I have. Probably been 2004, 2003. I think that's.
How about since these conditions went into place?
No, I have not. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. So it is a helpful tool of accountability for us, and it's the only one we have at our disposal. However ineffective it may be, it seems. And I think what the history of this application demonstrates is that there needs to be some mechanism of accountability here. But accountability aside, this BZA hearing is the only forum we have found effective to express to you our perspective, our comments, our input, our ideas. It's the only forum where it feels like we have any ability to influence how this commercial enterprise evolves in our neighborhood and impacts our lives. And to take that voice away from us by making this a permanent thing just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. And so I'm asking you not to do that and to put a term on the permit at a reasonable length. I think 1 year is obviously too frequent. I think 5 years seems a little long. I think you've hit a good number right here at every 3 years. So that would be one condition I would ask that you could consider. Second condition relates to frequency. Right now, I think he's allowed to do 4 a week. I would recommend that you reduce that to 1 or 2 a week, and I would cite 3 or 4 points to that end. One, I would remind you that for the first 5 years of this history of this permit, the applicant was allowed to host 2 events a week. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that frequency was upheld in a court of law by a judge in 2005 or 2006, I forget which. So that's one point I would make. There is historical precedent supported by judicial ruling. I would also call to your attention, I think there's an exhibit. You should have a flimsy blue or black notebook. And the second point is that the evidence doesn't suggest that the applicant needs to host 4 events or 3 events or even 2 events a week to be able to maintain the home. And the evidence that I'm referring to is in that exhibit. The permit requires the applicant to announce these events ahead of time to all neighbors in the Google groups. And since January of 2012, I have printed every single announcement out from the applicant. I have no reason to believe he has not complied with this requirement. And if you go through every single email, what you'll find is that the applicant has announced roughly less than 50 events over the past 28 months from January 2012 to February of 2014. And you can do the math, but that averages to less than a half an event a week. And yet he is still maintaining the home quite well. And I can tell you, I don't have the written documentation, but I can tell you from experience that that level of frequency has been characteristic since 2009. And I don't see any compelling reason why this body needs to allow the applicant to host 4 times or 5 times as many events a week as he needs to make this thing work for him. And I guess on the other point on the frequency, I have been in the past one of the most vocal critics of this. I can say I was a critic. I'm not here to criticize today. The past 5 years have been a lovely time in Woodland Waverly because the frequency has been at a level that seems tolerable to me, and I live immediately across the street. And I think we've hit on an equation. It seems to be working for the applicant. He's still there maintaining at home. I'm not here all angry and, so that's a last point on that. And then the last point in terms of frequency would be relating to the frequency with which you allow the applicant to host events on his front porch. It's my understanding that you were obliged to allow that use because the front porch is considered to be within the 4 walls of the structure, and that you don't have any authority to restrict that completely, but I would think you might have the authority to restrict or regulate the frequency of these events on the front porch. And the reason this is an important issue to me is when there's a sacred ceremony on that front porch, it inhibits me and my wife and my family from the free and lawful use of my own property. So if I do want to do yard work on a Saturday afternoon or have a yard sale or host a lemonade stand with my daughter and there's a wedding going on across the street, I either have to tiptoe around it or reschedule myself or risk the consequences of not. And if that happens every once in a while, that's one thing. But when you allow it, in theory, to happen every single Saturday afternoon of the year...
What are the consequences of having a lemonade sale while there's a wedding going on?
You have to be quiet. The kids that come to the lemonade stand, you have to tell them to shh.
But what are the consequences? I'm not
I find it to be a degradation of my quality of life that I cannot do yard work on a Friday or Saturday afternoon, that I cannot schedule any activity that might interfere with a sacred ceremony going on a few dozen feet away. And if I do interfere with it, I risk the possibility that I might be sued, as I have been sued before for doing yard work. And I think it does place a certain curtailment on the freedom to use your property in ways that probably all of you would take for granted on a routine basis. So I'm simply asking that, I'm not asking that you ban, I'm just asking, can you regulate the frequency? Can you allow the applicant to host, 1 or 2 events on the front porch a month and guarantee that neighbors have free use of their own properties at least a couple of times each month? That's really all I have to say. I appreciate y'all's service on the board, and I guess I can answer questions later.
Let me ask you, did you make the comment a few minutes ago that the frequency of averaged out to what?
I counted from the announcements 47 or 48 events over the past 28 months. I think that frequency averages to 0.47 a week. Does that make sense?
Sure.
May it please the board, my name's Henry Walker. You've already seen me on the video.
Can you pull that mic to you?
Sure. None of us are here opposing the application. All we're talking about is the conditions. It's whether the application should be made permanent or not, and it's about the number of events per week. Mr. DeMumbrian runs nice events. They're very elegant and they're very attractive. You've noticed there's a long, detailed list of conditions. Those lists of conditions have changed every year that the license has been renewed, or every time the license has been renewed, those conditions have been improved because both sides learn from experience. It started out, he had to get it renewed for 1 year, and then it was 18 months, and then last time it was 3 years. Your chairman made a motion for 5 years. In retrospect, I wish that motion had carried. Then 5 years, I think, would have worked just fine. And I think you ought to extend it for 5 years. We've learned how to have well-run events. But, of course it doesn't need to be permanent. The reason he wants it to be permanent is because you have heard, as I have heard, the Metro Council is considering eliminating altogether the ordinance which allows special events. I've had that discussion with the Planning Commission staff. That is being talked about. So Richard, obviously, he wants to get a permanent license so that even if the council repeals the statute, he can continue to hold events as a prior existing condition. So it's got nothing to do with avoiding controversy in the neighbors. We could set the limit at 7 years. That would be fine. Just don't make it permanent, because the council may decide that, especially in this tight little neighborhood, the special event thing just doesn't work very well. Now, let me just paint you a picture a minute. Wednesday night, you got 40 people next door. Thursday night, 40 people next door. Friday night, 70 people next door. Saturday night, 70 people next door. The next week, same thing. 40, 40, 70, 70. The next week, 40, 40, 70, 70. every week, every month, every year, forever. That's not a special event permit, that's a restaurant. Now, the reason that nobody in the neighborhood is particularly upset with events is because, as William said, he doesn't have nearly that many events. But that's the maximum that he is allowed to have under his current permit. For years, it was 2 events a week, and that was upheld by the Court of Appeals. Now it's 4. It ought to be cut back to 2 or 1 a week. Or so many per year. Give him 50 a year. That's plenty. That's twice as many as he's doing now. But it's a special event license, not a commercial license. And you know, I know this is a controversial case. It's been in front of the Court of Appeals on 3 separate occasions. Twice, the BZA denied him a permit altogether. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, after 15 years, we've pretty much worked it out. The detailed list of conditions work pretty well. He does run good events. There's an occasional screw up, but it's not a big deal. I've never made a complaint about an event. I have in the past spoken in favor of renewal of the application because they're nice events and they do bring people to the neighborhood. But nobody wants to live next to a popular restaurant that has 200 people a week visiting. By the way, that would be 11,000 people a year. 11,000 visitors a year under his current application. That's why I didn't want another bed and breakfast in the neighborhood. I didn't want to double that. So anyway, you have the power to take into account changes of conditions. We've learned from 3 trips to the Court of Appeals that there has to be an evidentiary basis in the record for what you do. Frankly, the safest thing for you to do would be to reaffirm the same conditions that were approved last time. That would be very difficult for anybody to appeal. The better solution, frankly, is to extend the time period on the application, make it 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and reduce the number of events per week. First of all, because that's not how many he's doing now, not nearly that many. And second, because there is now another commercial spot on the same street. There is a new bed and breakfast that's just open on the other side of him, which means more commercial activity. Not a lot, because the fact is the bed and breakfast has a fairly small impact on the neighborhood. It's only those big events that have a big impact. Even when they're well run and even when they're run within the conditions, it's still not obviously a residential environment when it's going on 4 times a week. Thank you.
I'd rather not speak.
Well, you have your turn to speak now.
I'm just here in support and definitely don't want any other made-up things said about me if I speak.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Roman, as you come back, you'll have 3 minutes, 55 seconds. Again, for purposes of our rules, please keep your comments on rebuttal to what was just said.
Yes, I will. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Walker has failed to tell you the Andretti's home is too small to host events. It's a bed and breakfast, which will have no impact at all in the neighborhood. It's so small that they really can't host events. They're also expecting, their baby's due in September. They don't expect to be hosting any activities there other than the B&B, but yet Mr. Walker stood up, interrupted the vice mayor, and insisted on making his statement about events. The BZA hearing process has been exhausting, and it has led to a great deal of dissension in the neighborhood. These few people are the only people left. It's humbling to see so many people who were opposed now support what I do because they realize it works. Placing another time limitation on this venue, the entire last year of the permit, I can't book events. The reason I have not been able to get the wheels on this business is because Mr. Walker and these people have kept this review process. You've just heard the only people opposing what I do say everything's working well. Their assumption then is if I actually increase activity slightly, something is going to cause a disturbance. Under the Tennessee case law, enforcement is not the appropriate use of limitations. I can be called before this board at any time with a show cause proceeding if I violate a scintilla of limitation. I'm extremely careful to abide by every limitation. Not a single noise ordinance violation has ever been reported in 14 years. Not a single police report has ever been made concerning a disturbance. There is no material evidence to support what they claim, only the fact they don't want events. We live up the hill 30 yards from 8th Avenue, Zany's Comedy Club. Cars are coming up in Benton and parking all over our street. This area of Nashville is extremely busy. Mr. Cochran manages the Inn at Evans Mill. He moved in across the street from me after I had been open 3 years. Mr. Walker did the same thing, moving in next door. These people move in while I am operating, doing large weddings of 150 people. I agreed to reduce those numbers to only 75 and then to do 2 small events of only up to 40 people. Most of those small events, I only have 10 or 15 people. They're corporate retreats. A Luke Bryan video shoot at the house just 2 months ago. Those kinds of small things have no impact on the neighborhood at all. These arguments that they have made are simply irrelevant. They aren't truthful. They're just brought to complain about something. The renovation of Robincroft took place in 1994 to the tune of $1.2 million. The HVAC systems have to go through complete repair. The capital improvement that I'm facing, if I continue to operate the way I am, I will not be there. If I can't get the wheels on this business, if I can't develop savings, I'm currently in a Chapter 11 reorganization because of what happened. I can't get this business going. Please, as a board, support the Metro Council's decision to make historic home events part of what our city is and what it's going to become. And there has been enough review, more than a decade of it. I'm asking you to look at these limitations, and please look at the map of my street. Mr. Walker is the only person on the north side of Benton Avenue, the only person opposed to what I do. On the other side, Mr. Cochran is the only household other than the Grahams who just moved on the street. Please look at this sheet. One home is in foreclosure, and Ms. Farrell always supported my application. Everyone else on Benton Avenue who knows what has happened, the people across the street, 2 ladies next to Mr. Cochran signed in support saying they've never been bothered. This is material evidence.
Time, Mr. DeMond.
I've got a question that the folks that spoke before had said something about, you're not averaging 4 events a week, and so we should consider lowering that. And I know you don't want necessarily a number lower, but if that were to be part of a condition, if we were to consider taking away the time restriction, what is a reasonable number? I mean, could you live with 2? Could you live? You did for several years. Could you live with 2 or 3?
Mr. Taylor, thank you for asking these questions because this is so important. I'm literally making a decision whether to close the home. I can't go through this anymore. I'm 54 years of age. I have high blood pressure. I cannot continue to be a lightning rod. My house was just egged on 2 consecutive evenings. Right. You can imagine how my wife feels. We don't deserve this. We came into a neighborhood and bought this historic home and saved it from demolition. And we've done nothing but try to make this a special place, which the vast majority of neighbors support. The 2 small events I do, up to 40 people, are teas, ladies' occasions. They have no impact on the neighborhood. The weddings that we do...
Because they're in the day or that type of thing?
Because of the number, there are about 20 cars. People come to a car. We're on the edge of the neighborhood right up the hill. And every person living on Benton Avenue, except the handful of people, has indicated the petition that was signed in 2011 by 140 people in the neighborhood, we'd been open 11 years. They support what we do. They didn't want our limitations to be restricted. So if I do less than two large events, I simply can't make it. And every week I get calls for, say, a rehearsal dinner, which might be 30 or 40 people, and then I have a wedding for 70 or 75 people, and then I have 2 small events during the week, like a corporate retreat for CSAC. It literally has no impact on the neighborhood. Mr. Walker's at work. Mr. Cochran leaves on weekends to go to Evans Mill, and he's not home, and yet he says he's bothered on Saturday doing his yard work. He has a lawn boy that cuts his grass. These kinds of things that people say are not truthful. They don't support what really happens.
Sir, respectfully, and I hear what you're saying completely, and there's a lot of using names, but frankly, I heard Mr. Walker say that you've done a really good job, and he thinks you do nice events. So if you could just respond to the question about, is there a different number that would work for you if we decide to look at the number? And if you could tell us why the time limitation is really an issue, why is it a problem for you to come back every 5 years or every 7 years?
It is because it leaves me completely up in the air about whether I can plan for the future. I am literally, if the Metro Council decides to abrogate this piece of legislation, I'm 53 years of age trying to develop a business that may not even exist. I'm not going to have anything. Now, if my events were bothering Mr. Walker, he knows, he's an intelligent lawyer. He went to Harvard and Yale. He knows that if he can whittle away at my events, I literally am not going to have anything left. And the 2 small events that we have during the week, if we book them, and a lot of weeks we don't have those events because people aren't calling for them. They don't have any impact. The only thing I have are the rehearsal dinners and the weddings on the weekend. Most of those are inside. That's why I asked for 1 hour. The blanket ban that was placed on not using my front lawn. The board has issued a permit to a venue in East Nashville very recently that allowed for the lawn to be used. The first demonstrant opinion, the Court of Appeals spoke to the blanket ban.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've heard a lot of testimony today, and what we're just trying to get and ascertain is the answer to his question. What risk would there be if you ended up having to cut the number of events? Is it a business issue? Is it not being able to book certain types of events like the weddings? I mean, we need to know facts. Let's drop all the rhetoric about anybody else involved.
It's basically capping the financial evaluation. When I look at the complete HVAC system is going to have to be replaced in the next 2 years. It's over 20 years old. I have to be able to do a financial, and as a Purdue graduate, I have some business training. If I can't get the wheels on this business, I need to fold. I need to convert my Chapter 11 to a 7 and liquidate. You can imagine how my wife feels. She doesn't know what's happening with us. Do we have a future here, or should we let the opposition win, and should we close? And that's where I'm almost at.
So I guess, the only other question that, and I've heard your case for not having a time limit, and if we were to impose another time limit, some of the neighbors have said 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, I guess that's up for us, but I just think that at least in that range seems long enough to build something. Is that, if it were 5, 6, or 7, does that alleviate some of your concern?
The Metro Council obviously has the prerogative to come in and abrogate the statute. I will have no business at that point if they do.
His question was not about what Metro Council is doing. It's about whether they, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you're grandfathered, you would be for 5, 6, or 7 years. I mean, you would just have a time limit on it, and assuming that's there, and I'm not. But anyway, the question is, how long does it take to really get the business established over, regardless of what the Metro Council does? Because I can't predict that, and I wouldn't want to sidestep what they're doing anyway. So.
I'm sorry, I believe what I'm hoping that you see is that if you gave me a 5-year permit, the whole last year where I am right now, I included an email of a bride that inquired about an April 2015 date. How do I respond to that? How do the wedding coordinators come to me who plan weddings a year and a half or 2 years out? How can I begin to get something going when I know this is not permanent? And I would submit that after this many years and this much review, with the show cause hearing available, what I heard from the neighbors is, what if he doesn't comply? I could be back before this board in 3 months with a show cause proceeding.
Yes, sir. I think we just still need to get focused. What the issue, let's just say we can address your concern with planning with the brides. Let's say we can, if there's a time limit and if we can address what happens if you have things already scheduled. How long does it, you've been in business 15 years, you're operating, you're saying things like you've got to get the business going. What more needs to happen that is pertinent to what we're deciding today?
Different than you've already testified.
I can't continue physically to do it on my own. Do you realize I am doing the maintenance, the repairs, the lawn service, the housekeeping? I don't have the profitability built into and it's not going to happen unless I can get the wheels on the business. And that's what's not happened. And the evidence, based on the changes that have occurred in the last 6 years and the decrease from the weddings, I no longer do weddings of 150 people. They're only 75. They work quite well. There hasn't been a complaint. The people directly across the street from my house, next door to Mr. Cochran, don't have a problem. If I can't get, I would be willing to compromise and drop a small event each week to do one tea, which would have, I can't believe what an impact that would be.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you one last time. Are you saying that if we set a time limit, hypothetically, if there's a time limit and it were 3 years or 10 years or 20 years, are you saying that at the end of that period, say it's 20 years, so 18 years into this, someone wants to book a wedding 2 years in advance, you don't know what to do, so there's that level of uncertainty?
The last part of any time period, I'm faced with that uncertainty. They're faced with that uncertainty. The wedding coordinators, they won't bring brides to the home knowing. And with the capital improvements that I'm forced to make in the near future, if I can't get some sort of sense of stability, how could you or I or anyone do this?
That's what I needed to know.
What I'd ask you most importantly to please look at this evidence of Benton Avenue. The people that have lived here and seen it. There are 3 households on Benton Avenue that do not want what I'm asking.
You're actually retestifying to things we've already heard, and we've taken those things into account, okay?
Thank you. It's very, very difficult. Thank you for listening and for being patient with me. Very little sleep last night. This has been, as I said, 12 years of being tarred and feathered by neighbors. You've heard the rest of it. Thank you so much.
I actually think maybe you are better in the driver's seat than you realize you are as far as this longevity thing goes here, because this is a special event, a special exception that you have there on this property. Whether you get a 3-year renewal here or a 5-year or a 15-year, you're really the master of that by the activity that you go
forward with. Yeah.
Right.
Let's close the hearing. I think we can talk.
You hear people wanting to cut you back, and you said to the board here what you need to do to operate. In your opposition, I've heard that you do a fine thing there. So I don't see that you really have a fear insofar as that goes, as far as a special exception. I'll talk more about the other part in the deliberation of the meeting, but again, I think you're the master of your own extensions here myself.
I've tried very hard. And if people won't use their driveways, how in the world can I ever run a business when you've seen the pictures and the evidence. Okay. They will not use their driveways. And I do not let cars park on their curb, but that's what they're really afraid of.
All right. Thank you. Close the public hearing, Joey.
Close the public hearing on case 2014-1.
Will somebody please educate me exactly what the request is? It's on... No more time limit. He doesn't want it to be limited to the property. And what else?
That's all.
That's the only two requests.
Number 3? There are 11 points on the screen, and these were approved through October of 2014.
I didn't understand him to be trying to change all of that.
And so I think that if you wait too long, to his point, if he waited until the September meeting, well, you can't plan anything,
I completely
I think what he would like for us to do is remove the first two that are in red.
Right.
And what the neighbors that came in opposition would like for us to do is restrict number 8 further, instead of 4 events to fewer events.
Okay.
And there's no restriction, I don't think, in terms of the number of porch events. And that was the only other thing that I remember them asking.
Okay. I thought, Joy, didn't you say something about number 3? Or did I imagine that?
No, somebody
When it says previous condition, is that the existing condition?
These are the existing conditions that were agreed upon. That were agreed upon in October of 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. That was our order. That was our motion.
Okay.
From last time.
I want to thank Joey for pointing this out, and I think it just got lost in all of this. But basically, in the front of Mr. DeMumbrian's request that he gave us today are his requested conditions. If you think that's an appropriate to read through, I think we just got it, so I don't know that you've seen it, but might be worth having a discussion about.
I mean, I guess my initial reaction, and I did read through the stack of information from all sides, and it's a huge stack, and it does go back 14 years, and there's a whole lot of history and baggage and good relationships and bad relationships that I know have had an impact on everybody that's involved with it personally. But to me, it seems to come down to what we did 2 years ago, almost 3, seems to work. And it was my very first day here on this board, I think one of my first or second meetings. And I do remember it, and I do remember us talking about, because it was a much more bitter exchange and experience. And I do remember the comment being made from the board that, if any of these are violated, to report it and be active about it, and to, we expect the conditions to be met. If they're not, then y'all have a neighborhood association, and you can report it individually, that kind of thing. And I don't think there's been anything reported, at least not to our board, and we haven't had anything brought back to us. So that, to me, says what we did 2 years ago works. And I'm, a little concerned about the number of events, but, and we can talk about that more, but I think it fundamentally works. And I think that's a good thing. Now, so I'm inclined to talk through the first 2 points and see where folks are there. I think at minimum, the applicant has earned a longer time period. And I want to get some, I don't know what historically the board has done in terms of making these things permanent.
David, I'm sorry, when we were talking about the first, are you talking about the first 2 on the screen or the first 2 in his?
No, the first 2 on the screen. My position is right now, I'm only concerned with what we did last time, which is the order that you have and what's on the screen. Because I think if it's not broken, don't change it. And I haven't heard evidence that that needs to be changed other than the first 2.
Well said. Thank you very much. I think given all the emotions, and unfortunately, I think it's time for the healing to begin in this neighborhood in a very big way. I will say this has been, for any business, an extremely onerous requirement to come back every couple of years. We have precedent for that in other arenas that it's required, but this one has been fine-tuned to a very limited position. So I'm with you on that issue. As far as my thoughts on this, I certainly feel that Mr. DeMumbrian has exhibited, not only from his own opposition or supporters in some way, that he runs great events and that he has done all of the things that he's been required to do. By evidence, they haven't filed anything since 2005. We've had no show cause hearings. I think we have put the man through what was required in order to prove that he was capable of handling it, but I don't know that we need to require him to jump through these hoops. It's expensive and it's time consuming, and there is an uncertainty in financial world right now in not being able to do those things, and I think anything more than that is onerous. However, the one problem that I do seem to have, and I guess this is part of the David Taylor school of thought, is that I have a problem making this condition run with the residents.
I agree.
I just feel like that somebody else should have to prove the same conditions and be met, but I don't think that Mr. DeMumbrian or his immediate business needs to come back here unless he has a show cause hearing. I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say. And I don't think, and what's so interesting to me, I'm so sorry, I just opened my mouth again, but it's very interesting that there's a commentary about how many events he's having, and then there's a commentary that he's not even meeting it, so we should cut him back. I think the man should be allowed to run his business in a way that we've allowed him to, and he's not using it is to their benefit. And we shouldn't start penalizing him for that.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I think they're protected too. If we keep that running with the business and not with the property, then I think that can be addressed at another time if the property is sold.
Yeah, I agree. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I had less of a problem taking it. I think if you have conditions that work and you're holding the space to the conditions, it shouldn't matter necessarily who owns it. I guess that, well, I think that, the capital, the point of investment is important, and I think that's driving, to some extent, the length of time that may be in people's minds on how long this thing should go. And, yet, you invest, if I were going to invest in infrastructure thinking, boy, I personally had to do this for 10 more years versus, well, no, maybe I could have a relative or sell it to a friend or sell it, anybody that, again, is bound by these conditions, would I be more or less likely to invest in it? So, I tend to think if someone follows the rules and the rules are very explicit, then,
I'm not even sure what the mechanism would be if the property were to trade hands for the future. Do they have to come, if we're 8 years into a 10-year renewal period, do they have to come at that point and get, I wouldn't buy a business knowing that I had to go before the board after I bought the business to see if I would be allowed to run the business.
They wouldn't be precluded, and correct me if I'm wrong, they wouldn't be precluded from coming back sooner to address that before the board.
You got that exactly right, Ms. Chaplin. I think it's something that's bound to come up in the discussion here for you guys today. If, for example, this was a 10-day permit, you could come in on day 5 and ask for an extension of that 10-day permit. It's just to be up to the board's discretion as to whether it was an appropriate time to do so. But that was one of the concerns that was raised, obviously.
A potential new owner could come. They could come before the board potentially to sell, to say, here's what we're going to be doing.
But they could also be potentially coming into a situation where the board could say, we're going to give you a whole new set of requirements. So they really don't know what they're getting. That just seems like, why would you even get into that?
That these conditions run with the house?
I think they should go. I think they should go with the business, or some of these conditions should. And I think that coming back is just a vast waste of resource of this board, of Metro staff, of the owner, of Channel 3. This has got to be horrible TV viewing. why are we, I cannot see, I mean, we're not regulating a strip club here. We're not regulating a dangerous industry. This is something that has been working for years, and yeah, it's been tweaked. Okay, we've got it tweaked. Let's tweak it again, and let's move on with it. People have due process. They have the police number. They have 2 numbers they can call the cops. If it's a big deal, they can call 911. If not, they can call the other number. They can call Joey. They can call all these people and bring them back here. We don't need to schedule this years in advance to hear the same thing, the same personal attacks. I mean, it's just, there is a mountain of paper here. There's another waste. And it's all personal crap. And I'm sick of it.
What are you proposing?
If I'm proposing, I'm going to make a motion. And I don't know if you guys are ready to hear this or not.
If you were to make a motion,
If I were to make a motion, I would pick up Mr. DeMumbrian's limitations and restrictions supported by material evidence and precedent from the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is on the 2nd page. And I would say, let's adopt these, and let's be done with it.
Do you feel like there's really nothing material except for about a half an hour later on New Year's Eve and 15 minutes later on a weeknight, I think, that really is materially different? Do you see anything
I don't
materially?
see anything materially different, and I don't see anything on here objectionable. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I heard this case last time. Maybe I did. It was early, but I may have been sick, yeah. So I would have been just frustrated back then, too, although I would have been new and a little. But this is ridiculous. I'm sick of this. The personal attacks and...
I concur. I concur completely.
It's just ridiculous. And people aren't even acting like adults.
So what are you proposing?
I move that we adopt this. And we move on.
I'd like to know.
And you let it go with you go with the property?
Yeah.
And with no requirement to come back?
No. Why?
How do you feel about that, Cindy?
We've done it for other people.
Okay.
Actually, okay, go ahead.
Well, I feel like neither side really addressed specifically in any linear manner exactly what they wanted. So if we want to compare what Mr. DeMumbrian is seeking with what the order is, we can probably quickly dispense with what he's asking for. But in the opposition, actually, they did file specifically, I've looked at they responded to each one. So if we wanted to do, we could at least flip to both of those lists and go through them. I think we could dispense with that in short order. We may be doing more or less than what all the people here are asking us to do. But I would be opposed to the restrictions running. I think they have to go solely with this owner. He's the one that's demonstrated what he can do. And I feel very strongly, if I'm a neighbor and they have developed a rapport, whether it is a good rapport or not, with this particular business owner, he's in it for the neighborhood. The next person may not feel that way, and I think all the other property owners should have a right to come back if they chose to do so. So I think there should be some time limit, even if it's as much as 10 years, and I think the restrictions should go with the owner, the current owner.
I agree with that. A couple of things that caught my ear, got me concerned, was the talk about wanting a non-restriction on the extension of the thing based on the fact that the council may be passing a bill. Let me ask our legal staff here. If this board puts a condition on something, even if the council changes the rules later on, they're still bound by these, right? I mean, that's like ex post facto law or whatever.
If the BZA grants this permit with, whatever conditions, say, for example, 5 years or something like that, then that 5-year permit would stay in existence even if next month the Metro Council changed the law. And it's just simple grandfathering concept, basically.
And then in 5 years, this same body could come back and extend it for another 5 based.
If the law has changed and no longer allows a historic home event concept, then at the end of that permit, then the permission to carry on those activities would likely be expired.
That does raise a question, David, I think, of what you're saying, and that tells me something else, Cindy, as well, about our discussion, is that not that we need to be considering what council's doing, it may or may not pass, or any of those issues, but the premise behind allowing these historic homes to be renovated and utilized is to preserve our cultural heritage about this city. And so we've allowed these businesses to come together, and I think I may be changing my tune a little bit. I'm going towards David's thoughts. But it seems to me if this house has been, the investment has been made and all those issues, to risk that should it require another permit should he sell the business, and that's the opportunity behind the home as well as the business, then we would be penalizing him again by not being able to sell that home with an established business in place. And so then it becomes a whole different purchase, selling price for him, and a whole litany of other issues that, should that law be passed, he has no coverage for recovery. And so I think there's some validity to David Harper's argument that we probably should let it run with the House. But now, John Michael, this may be your issue, that all of these conditions run with the House, so that if any conditions wanted to be changed, anybody that may purchase the business would have to come back.
And anybody coming back looking to obtain a new permit, if you did it that way, would be subject to the board's determination.
What if we ran it with the property?
If you ran with the property, then the conditions run with the property for whatever period of time the board determines.
So anybody that purchased the business from him, unless they can accept these conditions as part of the business model, make that purchase from him without having to come back to us unless they wanted to change these particular conditions.
I think that states it correctly.
Okay.
So an option, I guess part of the question is, if you want to build a business, and after 14 years, it was going to be time for infrastructure improvements. If you want it to run with the property owner, with Mr. DeMumbrian, is there a reason to put a time frame at this point on his operating the business? What if we said it still is for the appellant only, the current property owners, but no time limit, and that way it does restrict his ability to sell it as a, should the law change, that it would be a lot tougher to sell it as a special event place, but it would alleviate the concern of just allowing, basically creating a business that you could put up for sale, and and yet allow him, as long as he owns that property, to maintain and grow the business as he sees fit.
I may be confused, just so I get clarity about what you're saying. Are you saying to not let it run with the house
Yes.
and the business, but just be to his ownership?
Let it run with the owner, but with no time
He
time.
doesn't have to renew his permit.
I don't think the man needs to come back here and renew the permit ever, in my opinion, again.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out
Sure.
an option. The time limit, from a business perspective, I really think you have to have a fairly long time limit in order to, if there is uncertainty about, your ability to continue to operate because of, who knows what legislation is going to be. You can't really totally, other than there is some reason for his concern, because it has been discussed. Now, whether it's likely to pass, I don't know. What kind of support it has, who knows? I don't know. But I think for that capital piece, and us not having to hear it again as long as he owns the property, because I don't, the third time will not be the charm. I've heard it twice, and and nothing's changed. In fact, well, that is not true. The thing that has changed is the specific testimony about anything that is being done incorrectly to these conditions was present in the first hearing. It was not present in this hearing, and that means that there has been dramatic improvement in terms of the testimony, in terms of the behavior. Whether or not that's related to the time frame, as it's been suggested, I don't buy that totally. I think it has gotten a rhythm. It is, there are mechanisms for complaint.
Especially after 15 years.
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to. And David, I was looking at his proposal. I don't see the differences. So I guess if I don't see a whole lot of differences between what we had and what they're proposing, I'm kind of inclined to keep what we have.
Well, this is nuance, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but his number 1 says for property owner only as his or her primary residence as required by law. And on the screen it says for appellant only. Now, in this particular situation, they are one and the same, but as soon as he sells the property under, as I read it, correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, it's saying whoever owns this has.
Well, I get that. I was thinking about
everything else.
I was thinking about the other things, because I mean, the big question I think that we're all talking about is how long does this last, and who does it apply to?
Just a question for our council. I just don't know the condition of this, but based on some of the other ones like daycares and stuff that we've dealt with, being a resident of that home, is that a requirement of the law? So that's not even under
the
discussion for us.
Metro Code at 1716-160, which deals with residential special exceptions, and Subpart B, historical home events. Subpart 6 discusses owner occupied as a condition for this one.
Thank you. So that's not even up for discussion in that first element.
Yeah, so I mean, it has to be owner occupied, and the question is, if another owner comes in to occupy this, is that acceptable to us, or does it have to go through the process?
I would just point out that in his terminology, I'm suggesting that he is putting it to the property essentially.
Yeah, it's not materially different than the conditions we put on him, except for he's extended these hours, I think, going through that by 30 minutes and 15 minutes. I don't see that there's a huge, and 30 minutes on number 5, 15 on 6A and 6B by 30 minutes. I don't have a problem with those conditions that he's asked for, but it seems to me we do have something we know is working without opening the can of worms for changes in times and being addressed. I think that reopens a totally different element. But I think that the two conditions that we're really under is do we make the man come back here, and can he sell his business and recoup what he's invested? I think, to me, I'm with you, David Harper. I think that I've changed my tune a little bit. I think we need to allow him to run his business unfettered, because he's proven his point. There is a show cause due process for anybody who has issues with that, and that he's allowed to sell his business and have it covered, that somebody won't come in and buy that home and take care of that home because they have an uncertainty about their future.
Let the record show I'm nodding my head.
All right. Somebody want to make a motion? I made the motion earlier.
Well, I guess that, it really does come down to, comfort level, and some of that is because of the history of the neighborhood and that type of thing. And I think that we have approved others without restriction that just didn't have any opposition. In fact, the neighbors were, the current neighbors who won't be permanent neighbors, were for it. And I think that on those didn't go with just the same owner.
You went with the property?
The last one that we did, I don't recall right off.
For church line?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's
right.
I guess what I'm trying to struggle with is, if this came to us without the baggage, but it didn't, and so you do have to filter that, and you do have to and I guess what I'm struggling with is it been filtered enough? Absolutely, and for a long period of time, and if there are enough criteria, meaning owner occupied, it's not going to be bought up by, a large hotel chain. It can't be bought up by anyone other than an individual who is going to personally live there and be proven to personally live there.
David,
Is that a condition of the house
let me
that's
clarify
remaining
that
and not a
just
hotel
little
being
bit.
built there?
You could potentially, and we do have this in another home event in the county where it's an LLC, but the majority shareholder must reside here. The code speaks to that. In the event of a partnership or event of this,
Right. Right. So the majority partner would have to live there, which certainly makes sense. It means that's a financing capital type thing. So it's someone intimately involved and financially involved would have to be there. So I guess that's why I don't really have a huge issue with treating it at this point in time like we treat others.
I'm with you.
But I mean, I'm ready to have somebody say, if they're concerns, I'm not.
Well, it's a special exception, right? This is a special exception. I mean, it's no different than somebody operating a daycare. And what I want to be sure, the concern is you don't want, because these are historic structures, and we want people to promote that. I guess what I struggle with is, I understand it as a business. I'm a business owner myself, as many of us are. But it is in a neighborhood. I mean, we still have, and I understand, other property owners don't like to feel like they're not in control of their own property. So, when I'm selling a home and I've got to sell the home next door and say, oh, by the way, there's always going to be a historic event space next door, that may have an impact on my property value that I don't want. And so I guess that's my concern. It's not just about supporting the business, which I'm not opposed to doing, but it's also about taking into account the other landowners' rights. And I just want to be sure that by keeping it with the land or by keeping a time limit on it, at least there is some sort of mechanism for the other property owners. And that's the only way I see to do that. But I'm very mindful of what everyone has said, and I don't necessarily disagree. I just feel like they have a say in it as well.
I guess I feel like they've had a say for 15 years. And the fact that they have come back and made him live to a very fine line of conditions. I don't know how much more you can get the man to jump through hoops to do that. But I guess my other point is that, and this is the bane and boon of a city that's booming and being it city and growing and living in an urban neighborhood. If you don't want to be impacted, you need to move somewhere else because it is part of the condition of living in an urban neighborhood. It's going to grow. God's not making any more property for us to grow into. So things are changing and shifting, and I think we all have to understand that process. But the point that the council was trying to make is that we were losing our heritage and the historical characteristics of our community because of these big houses and all of these other elements. And so from that wisdom, I sort of feel like we're penalizing somebody who took the leap of faith to do it and to make the investment and to really try to make something out of it that's a business that he can rely upon to be able to build it and finance it.
I haven't been here 14 years. I've only been on this board 2.5, but through the two cases, I mean, this isn't a one-way street. The first several years of this were rocky it seems on both sides. And, so I know that the folks that have spoken in opposition, I think that a lot of their points, early on points are absolutely valid and had some merit. And that's why it's still something that's very passionate for them. So I don't want that to get lost. But when I focus on what's happened since the first 3 years ago, I think that through the courts coming back to us, giving us guidance, through us working in the last hearing on the neighbor, working to kind of working with opposition to come up with what these points should be, and having that group agree with that predominantly, and to have that group come back now and say, these are nice events, I'm still worried about it, says that it's working now. But it was not a smooth sail, and this was not just somebody sailing into a constant wind. I mean, there were legitimate reasons that cause some of those things to happen. And so but that, that said, back to the two fundamental points, I can kind of live either way. I absolutely think that the restriction should be removed for Mr. DeMumbry, and whether it stays with him or goes with the property, that's where I'm still.
Where I differ on, I agree with 99% of everything I've heard today, but what I sort of disagree with is there's a difference between a zoning appeal and a special exception appeal. I think a special exception appeal to me is more like a contract, and to me, I've learned a long time ago, contracts should have beginnings and endings, not in perpetuity. So I don't see any problem with what they're doing now. I think they've done a remarkable job with it. And as I look at the comparison between this list and what I see there, I see no great difference. I'm for the approval of this thing, but I would be really for a term limit on it so that there's a limit and it can be extended again. Maybe that ought to be 5 years. I don't think 3 years is a little much, but 5 years, appointments to this board of 5 years, maybe that's got something to do with it. But.
You're just trying to get out of it, aren't you?
but you also can be reappointed, so I would say 10. If you make it 10, then nobody will hear it again.
Can we do it by two motions? Can we vote separately on those issues?
Sure.
Well, because I think we can take a vote on those two issues on whether there's going to be a time limit. I mean, can we make a motion on, I make a motion, there's a time limit, it's going to be X, and vote on that, and then can we make I make a motion that it
runs with the property.
The conditions run with the property, and vote on that?
I think you can. And we also
I don't know the purpose, but
we also have to vote on what the conditions are. Which ones you adopt.
Well, okay. So the big question is: are we in agreement that these are the conditions that need to be met from 3 down, or do you want to grant him these extra 15 minutes and 30 minutes that he's requesting?
Yeah, I don't think there was the extra 30 minutes on number 5. I think.
Well, the numbers are different, but another.
Well, it's not the same number 5.
Well, on this one about this, because this says 9:30
till 10
and then
o'clock here.
well, but it says completed. But this says 9:30, but then it's completed completed 30 minutes later.
And number 2,
it's departed by 10. So it ends no later than 9:30 with August departed at 10. And then on Friday, and I think this is the same time
by
limit.
11 o'clock.
And Friday and Saturday it says 10:30 with valet completed by 30. And what he's saying is basically everybody's got to be gone at 11. And the intent of what we're saying is everybody's gone at 11.
Okay.
It's just saying that the event's over at 10:30 and valet's done at 11. That means everybody's gone.
So my question to you is: we already know these.
Isn't there any opposition?
Do we want to just leave them, or do you want to make a change?
I would keep them like we have them because
that's the question, really.
They seem to work.
We want to keep those.
well, another issue with number 2 in Mr. DeMumbrin's brief, and which corresponds to number 3 on the screen. He's rewording that. All outside amplified music used for events must comply with a plainly audible standard of the noise ordinance as adopted by Metro Council to ensure it does not disturb adjacent property, which what's on the screen is time specific as well.
Well, that goes back to what we had heard before, and
that was
it was a huge issue with music outside.
Yeah, it was huge.
And if I would be inclined to just keep it like it is because it seems to work and nobody complained about the noise. And I think you're opening the door to complain about noise if you expand that. And like I said, I think it seems to have worked because we didn't hear anything about noise.
I agree. So proceed with your motion.
Well, I wasn't proposing to make it, but I will. I mean, I would make I I would make a motion that he comes back in 10 years and has to renew in 10 years. And I would also say that for any events that are booked in the subsequent 12-month period following that 10-year, he's allowed to proceed with those events so that he's not limited by, he's always going to know in plenty of time for planning of doing that. That's my thought.
How does he keep the business open if he can't, if he's just continuing to book for another year to meet that condition?
Because he's going to come back before 10 years, and he's already going to be booked out 11. But feel free to make another motion.
I think we just need to make a motion that he doesn't need to come back for this permit. I think we have made this man jump through every single hoop known to mankind.
All right.
So I'll make a motion. I mean, I guess I'm here. I guess I'd like to make a motion.
Ms. Jones, but before you,
go right ahead.
If I may, just to cut down on the confusion, or insert more confusion, depending on your point of view. Please be aware of exactly what you're proposing and which list you're referring to and what numbers, because some of these numbers.
Why don't you take a stab at it?
I guess I want to talk about the limit because we can throw something out and see if it sticks or not, but I'm hearing once a limit. I'm hearing
one or the other.
And I'm not. I can live with the limit, but I'm kind of in favor of it. I don't see. I think we need to see if 10, 15. What's the right number? Unless you really.
I don't know how much more proof you need from the man that he's going to do the business respectfully.
And for me, that's not the only issue with regards to the limit, and I'm not saying that I think council may or may not pass an ordinance changing this, but I do wonder if it seems like in a lot of other cases, we have these non-conforming issues that are allowed to continue so long as you meet the given standard for whatever that particular statute or code is. You've been doing automotive repair here even though it's no longer allowed under the zoning, and it was out of business for 3 months, but not the 24 months. So yes, you can reopen an auto repair place here. I'm wondering, what happens to the property value or the business value if there is a code change and someone's been running the successful business and the neighbors are happy, but we can't have any more.
Right.
And we put any time limit on it, then you have essentially diminished that possibility of selling that business and the property.
Well, but that is the same thing if you have a lease for your space and your lease runs out and your rent doubles
But you know that when you buy a lease, not when you buy a piece of property.
But not a legal issue. It's not saying we can't have restaurants in this neighborhood anymore. And you've got a restaurant, that if so long as you can meet your business obligations, you can renew your lease. But you'll be able to, or somebody else will be able to continue having a restaurant in that spot.
Well, this really goes to the second question, because if you feel like that this should only go with the current property owner, then you give that property owner a length of time which will recoup whatever capital needs to be in place now. And so if that's, well, you just say, we know it's 14 years old and it's time to do major equipment. So
I don't think you can tell the man how he needs to run his business, though. I mean,
I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I'm not doing that at all. I'm just
making sure I understood.
No, I'm saying that if you are looking for a time limit, I think it is related to the second question, which is, does it go with the property or just simply the current owner? And if it goes with the property, then I think it's just a different question, because if it goes with the current owner, then it should be long enough for that current investment to kind of cycle through. If you assume that rules change and it's not going to be something they can renew. And to me, that kind of 15-year mark is probably, if you want to put a limit on it, but I'm comfortable if you just let it run with the current owner, just to not have him come back. And I guess it goes back to that's why I think it really does relate to, should this rule or the special exception go with the property or the owner. In other situations in town, we made it with the property. In this situation, because of its history, it's been applied to the owner. I think because of its history. I don't know. There may be other special reasons for it. I can't speak for the past boards and what they did. Just the last decision and then this one.
Well, there's so many variables about a condition like this. I like the thing about the current owner, because this current owner has proven their ability and their track record. He could sell it, and the next owner may not be anywhere close. And
well, I'm comfortable with the current owner with no limit, but if you all feel like there should be a limit, then I think it should at least be 15 years.
No, I think I'm
comfortable with no limit.
I'm comfortable with current owner, no limit.
All right, well then, I think I think the current owner with no limit with the current conditions.
I just like.
Then I'll.
Here's the one thing I think I just need to get off my chest. And I don't think it would surprise any of you as a small business advocate that I tend to be on this side of things. But if this was a restaurant, regardless of all of the citizenry issues, and we've dealt with this in 12 South, we've dealt with this on 8th Avenue, we've dealt with this in a lot of places that is residential and historical. If you allow a restaurant to go into that place, then that is considered a non-conforming use, no matter who comes in to that space. If it's a restaurant, they're allowed to use it for a restaurant. They don't have to go back and get new permits for that non-conforming use as it's already been approved. So most people, when they are considering buying a business, are looking for that either a non-conforming use as a part of the business strategy. And what we're basically saying, if we're going to let it run with him only, then we are basically knocking out any potentiality of him being able to sell that business and these conditions be met. Again, they have a due cause situation as an approved non-conforming use.
This is a special exception
I understand
in a neighborhood area.
Well,
but I think
set of guidelines, based on those guidelines are granted to this owner and this appellant.
I don't disagree.
It doesn't open it up to the entire world to come in there, in my mind.
it's more like a daycare or a church. I mean, it's different than another kind of operation, and that's my hesitation. But I don't disagree with what you're saying, except that when we are talking about a residential neighborhood, I know it's urban. I'm not trying to be opposed to that, but I just feel very strongly that what we've already approved, or what the board already approved, had to do with a lot of compromise between both sides, no question. And they've done well with that. And so I don't think the only way that he's limited from selling his business is if the zone is changed anyway. We can't help that. If
not unless we grant it now and then it becomes a grandfathered non-conforming use that's what I'm proposing. That's why I'm saying this, is because knowing that there may be a law coming down here, do we now penalize him from being able to sell his business?
Well, what we're saying is that he can continue to run it as long as he wants to run it.
That's right.
And I'm just not so sure that anybody has. Yeah, I don't know. I think that because of the residential aspect of it, I mean, is where I'm, and just from everything else that we've heard says that no, this seems to be a pretty fair compromise, and I don't know what this council's going to do. That may not go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm willing to compromise on the fact that it just runs with him without issue. I don't have a problem with that. What I was trying to open everybody's eyes to, this is not one way or the other, but the fact of the matter is that we know when we make an investment of a purchase versus a lease that has a term and all those conditions, this man has put his entire livelihood and family on the line here. It's very different. So I'm just saying it's a home. It's another issue. If he was going to do this and somebody had to come up with another permit to do due diligence on his business, they can come and do that before he sells. So if that's the condition that we need, is that the case, by the way?
What's the question?
If we make it go with Mr. DeMumbrian himself and not with the property, should he decide he wants to sell his business, he's got a lucrative book of events and he's got an opportunity to sell the home, can the potential purchaser come here to get the granted permit before they purchase the building so that they understand what the conditions are.
Only a property owner can appeal.
Potential,
Or someone under contract.
Oh, under contract. And that was the clarification I was thinking. I was about to say it has to be the property owner, but it can be someone who's under contract for a
so it
transaction.
could be
of that
contingency under his
property.
contract.
That's right. And typically it would be in that scenario, just like it would be with any other sale of a business.
Okay, so he's got an out
permits,
opportunity then if
licenses,
we
et cetera.
condition that based on himself.
John, if I could add too, it's also as it relates to the daycare home mothers that are leasing the property from the landlord. You know, those ladies come here, they don't own the property,
Prior
but they
to.
are someone with the owner's permission. I think you can impute that the owner gives that person the permission to file an appeal on their property. Surely they could.
So I think that I'll try to make a motion, and I think it can be simple. And that motion is that we grant the special exception with the exact same conditions that were ordered by the Metropolitan Zoning Appeals Board in case 2010-077 on this piece of property, with the exception of number 1, which set a date for which this needed to be renewed. Which, it goes with the appellant and everything else is the same.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying
There is no condition.
Everything is the same, but there is no time limit for this appellant, and it goes with the appellant, not the property.
I guess I can wait till there's a second before I comment on that.
Oh, I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Comments?
So under that scenario, as long as this is a legally conforming use, in essence, someone else could apply for this use for themselves as it goes with the appellant. But if the law should ever change or the code should ever change, it cannot be transferred.
That's another good legal question. I'm with you, David.
And if I understood the question, in the event of a sale of the property,
You'd be the only one that understood the question if you did.
it's going to be the historic home event permit is going to be for the appellant under this motion, and only for the appellant under this motion.
So Metro Council puts a new ordinance in, that's not considered grandfathered as non-conforming use, it's just with him.
It can't be transferred if the law changes.
Correct. The terms of the permit would be otherwise unaffected. Or the terms of this permit issued by this board would be otherwise unaffected. The same conditions would still apply. And then if it's in the event of a sale of the property, so you have to let me think about it a second. I hate doing that, but you have to let me think about it a second.
Let's all be quiet until we can think about it.
That's a good question. You play Who Stumped the Council?
This makes for horrible radio.
A little dead air time. Who's the singer in the group? Can't you entertain us, Richard? Here's Zach Brown rendition.
Which one?
Oh, any of them.
Having done the math, Mr. Harper, in the event that the permit is granted under these conditions by the board, but then at a later date, the Metro Council were to change the zoning laws to take away historic home events as a special exception use allowed under law, then the use by the appellant, pursuant to the terms of this permit, could continue per grandfathering statutes under Tennessee Code Annotated 13-7208, I think under subpart B1. Then, at a later date still, the current appellant, current homeowner, Mr. DeMumbrian, chose to sell the property. He sell the property, no problem. However, the number 2 on our list of conditions here would have expired or would have changed, and therefore the permit would expire. So, most simply stated, if this motion passes from the board, then the permit is issued. Then at some theoretical later date, the zoning ordinance changes and historic home events are no longer allowed. Then, at yet another date, Mr. DeMumbrian sells the property to someone else. That new owner of the subject property would not have a permit and would not enjoy the grandfathering status that Mr. DeMumbrian enjoyed. I know it's a long answer, but I think it's accurate.
Yes.
I think it's egregious. to condition homes for its businesses. Would you like you to want me to, I'm sorry.
So my rhetorical question, since we're discussing the motion, is does that make it a poison pill? Because we are in a interesting situation where we have only 5 people here. So if 2 people find that egregious or hard to vote for, then
we keep them in for proceeding.
We'd have to.
No, if it
scuttle and start over.
If it gets 3 votes, it waits until next time somebody can listen to it. And that's what Joey tells us at the beginning of each meeting. So
you are correct, sir.
Yeah. I still think you ought to record it and put it on the video so you don't have to read it every time. But
I'm not saying that stops me from voting. I just want that to be clear, and I would hate for that to. We've done a lot of negotiating, so I just want to make sure that's what everybody agrees that we're voting on. You're all adults.
Everyone understands the motion. We have a motion and a second.
I just would like to say I concur with you, David. I do find that condition is a little bit of an egregious requirement. I'm struggling with the fact that this is out here and it's public and that everybody understands there is a law in front of council. It is, to me, the bitter pill is putting a condition that could sacrifice anything he builds. And him trying to go through, an economic recovery, which we all are, I consider that we are actually putting his business at risk, and we're interfering.
Okay, I don't disagree, but I guess what I'm saying is I think we either need to have one or the other. I like this businessman, but why not put a limit on it? If we're going to let these conditions run with the land under this special exception, why not have some limit? That doesn't affect him.
I can work with that.
I can do, but I think we have to have one or the other. No, but I could go 10.
I can do that. Can you do that? Let it run with the land and go 10 years.
either way, I don't hear it again. That's not my motivation. If the transcript ever.
If I'm alive in 10 years, I'm pretty sure I won't be here.
Are you comfortable with that, David?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I would let it run with the land, and I wouldn't have a time limit on it. But I mean, I understand and respect the concerns expressed. So I mean, it's not a poison pill for me. I would vote for the motion as is, but I would prefer a friendly amended motion as discussed.
What was the friendly amendment?
Well, the conditions as they are now, they're not on the screen anymore, but that in the motion was that it.
So you would take out one and two.
Yeah, which by default means it runs with the property.
Oh, but you would rather have he don't want any limit. He would take out 1 and 2 completely.
I'm with him.
He's already said that.
We would compromise with a 10-year limitation, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I would go with the limitation and keep it with the property. That way, not looking too closely at the crystal ball, but if a law gets enacted, it's not going to be in front of council, and a week later it's going to be a law. I mean, it has to go through readings, and there's probably time to do something. Mm-hmm. But
this grandfather.
Well, I guess my thinking on it is that, and the reason that I had made the original motion, which I may end up withdrawing, or as this discussion on that motion continues. Was that it would allow him to continue his business for his career. And so if you have, should he choose? And so if you go with the property and have a time limit, I'm more inclined to think 15 years because it really is a cycle for capital, I mean, for mechanical, all the other stuff that you would, put in to improve it and have, let's say, over the next, another 10 or 15 year life out of it.
Okay with 15 years?
From a business perspective, I think if the reason for doing this is to not tie him and allow him to have some benefit from that it has to be a longer period.
I think 15 years, I mean, if everybody's comfortable with 15 years and running with the land, then he gets revisited. He gets the benefit of it.
Running with the appellant?
No, we're taking off appellant. That was the bigger sticking point.
Because if the Metro Council does away with this,
business is all the way.
He
can't sell it or transfer it.
as a business.
You can vote, but I'm not for that. So.
Okay. Let's make a motion, see where we go.
Do we just want to amend the motion?
We have your motion. Are you
Well,
withdrawing or
it actually is a whole, I will withdraw my motion.
Sorry.
And I'm going to make another motion, so I will.
Okay, the motion is withdrawn.
I will move that we approve the special exception and require the same conditions that were ordered under the appeal case 2010-077 at the same property, ordered on, it looks like October 20th, 2011, with the exception that this is valid for 15 years from the date that the original order would have expired, which would be October
2014.
Well, which would be 15 years from October 20th, 2014. And that number 2 is stricken, and that this would run with the land for that period of time.
I'll second.
All other conditions apply.
Sorry. I'll second that.
Is council happy with that? And Joy, did you get all that?
Council's content.
Okay.
For purposes of clarification, David, everything else is the same. Remove appellant only, and the 15-year clock starts October 20th, 2014.
Yeah, from the date that the 3 years expires, there's another 15.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Your mic's off.
You turned your mic off.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? I'm for the motion, but everything with the exception of the land and the appellant thing, I can go for. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay.
Record, the case has been approved on a vote of 4 for, 1 against of the conditions as stated. With that, the Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned. Thank you.